newest member of the group, Senator Weiland. Welcome back, sir. You've been with us before, and now you're back, and your presence. You give us our quorum. I believe Ms. Jones, if you take the roll call, please.
Sure will. Senator Lowenthal, Senator Hancock, Senator Weiland, here. Assemblymember Lara, Assemblymember Buchanan, here. Assemblymember Hagman, here. Esteban Almanza,
here.
Kathleen Moore, here. Pedro Reyes.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And as you announced, Assemblymember Lara will be joining us for the day. Assemblymember Brownlee could not join us, so we expect Mr. Lara to show up shortly. We have a quorum. Minutes.
Yes, the minutes are ready for your approval.
Is there a motion? So moved. Been moved and second. Any comments on the minutes? Hearing none. You take the roll. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Ayes have it. Thank you.
The Executive Officer Statement on tab 3, we have a few items we want to share with you tonight. 4 items in particular. We wanted to give the board an update on the priority certification round that we just wrapped up. And as a result, we actually have 250 projects that submitted for the certification for 117 school districts, and that represents over $768 million in requests of unfunded approvals. And that's just shy of over 50% of the projects on the unfunded list. We still have about $1.4 billion in request. And so the certification rounds, or this certification actually is valid until July 10th. And so if any cash comes in the program, we can actually provide apportionments. And with that, we also wanted to give the board an update that we had money from the last priority of funding round, $11.5 million, that we still needed to allocate, but we had money in different pots, so we couldn't really reach a lot of different projects. And we actually have money from the time limit on fund releases, those projects that suspended in October, and they were taking action in December. We have $60 million in play. So again, the goal is to bring in March those projects for apportionments based on the certifications we have. We actually held a solar hearing a few months ago, and we wanted to give the board an update that we're still working with the entities involved, the California Energy Commission and the Division of State Architect and some of the outside vendors, to try to create a comprehensive web page in which we can lead and direct folks to the various sources of program funding for those various solar initiatives. So again, we're still working on those that particular project, and we'll provide some more outreach events in the future. So we'll be reporting back with some more progress reports. And as far as the joint use program, in regulations, it actually does specify that the program has funding rounds, application rounds, and they come in March. And at this time, we're not recommending accepting any projects since we don't have any authority in the program, or very limited authority. We only have $600,000. And we still have projects in abeyance that we still need to talk about. So again, we don't recommend at this point in time to bring projects forward. And our last item we wanted to share is the administration cost. There was an item posted on the status of funds last month that reflected a posting of the admin cost, and it actually was a posting for 4 years, and what we call is a contra adjustment. So originally the program charges was posted to the modernization program, and it was reverted back to the overcrowded relief program. So with that, that resulted in $73.2 million being posted commensurately between the two funds. So you actually showed an increase in the modernization program and a decrease in the overcrowded relief program. And so beginning historically, from a historical standpoint, back in 2002 through 2005-06, we actually did post the admin cost to new construction. But prospectively, beginning in 2006-07 budget year, those charges have been posted to the modernization account. So staff was reviewing the program funds over the summer and was trying to determine which program was the least active and how much funds that we actually did have available. So we actually posted those adjustments accordingly. So with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Thank you. Sure.
I just have a comment. If in the review of how we do post the administrative costs, if it's ever been considered to apportion those costs commensurate with the amount of funds in each of the programs. So across the programs at the level that their proportionate share of the running of the program is. Have we ever looked at that?
We've never approached it in that fact. If you do a proration prospectively, I mean, there would be different allocations, and again, it's something that we haven't approached. But I think there is flexibility in the language in the Budget Act that it applies to the program. It gives you the authorization to charge the account, but not really specify to what program. So there is flexibility there. But the board's never approached that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Before we get any further into the agenda, it's my understanding that Santee appeal has been pulled. And what are the potential ramifications of that pull? It has been pulled, it's been approved, but I just want to go on record that does put the program or the appeal in jeopardy. Please explain.
Yeah, well, I guess there's a little delicate issue there. We do have a project that had a 90-day certification, and they must submit that certification by March 14th. And the concern is there is somewhat of a gamble because the regulation is very prescriptive, and should the certification expire, then the project basically goes on the bottom of the unfunded list.
Okay.
So that's specified in regulations.
Okay, now the request came in today, so I just wanted people to be aware of that. Okay, thank you. And then the other item that was pulled was the
Transfer items.
the transfer item, the action item, options for transferring the lease
Tab
purchase.
11, yeah.
Tab 11, just want to go on record that that has also been pulled in case you're here for those items. Thank you.
So,
Okay,
could
any
I-
comment? Yes.
Thank you. I'm George Phillips. I work for the Alameda Boys and Girls Club, and this is Robbie Ling, who is the facilities manager for the Alameda Unified School District. I know you pulled the item, and I appreciate that, but as long as I was here, we wanted to take the opportunity to reinforce how important we think the commitment to joint use program funding.
Okay, let me interrupt you for a second.
Certainly.
Because the item has been pulled, there's no item to speak to, but there is an open public comment, so we're taking your testimony right now under the public comment.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, because the item doesn't exist right now.
That's fine. As I said, we...
And one more interruption, we welcome Assemblymember Lara to his first meeting with the State Allocation Board. So go ahead, sir.
Joint use, we feel, is an incredibly important way for limited public dollars to be stretched. I think Robbie will attest to the fact that our project in Alameda, which is on the approved but unfunded list, is a model for that. And while I didn't come here to get into detail about that project, I will tell you that the school district is already using the facility for a number of things. And what makes it unique, and I think it's the future of what we'll all be facing in this state, is the fact that this project is 80% funded by private means, as opposed to what I understand is usually 50-50 or even the other way around. That's how important the school district and the citizens of Alameda felt about providing this facility. The facility's built in an end of town that had no infrastructure previously, and it's looming to be a great, great success. I know you'll be dealing with the difficult problem of finding money. That's always a challenge in this economy. And we would appreciate it as you look, that you think about joint use funding as a priority. Robbie, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to represent Alameda Unified School District that it is a big asset for, hey John, big asset for Alameda Unified School District to do a joint use with the Boys and Girls Club. And the board the superintendent is behind it, and we have sent some letters to some people, and we are 100% behind it. And for the community and the area where it is, it's good for the community and the school district.
Okay, well, be assured that you have a very strong advocate in Senator Hancock, and she's been pushing for this issue. At this point, we've asked staff to continue to work with the Treasurer's Office and the Attorney General's Office to look for ways of doing this, and maybe other remedies that can be found, but she has been pursuing this issue on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your diligence, and I certainly appreciate PSC's diligence in getting us through this project. I've been here before,
Okay.
and I'll probably be here again, and so will Robbie, but thank you for your diligence.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Okay. With that, tab 4, the consent.
Consent.
Is there a motion on consent? Moved in second. Any objections, any comments, public comments? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions, none, thank you. We now move to appeals.
You want to skip over the financial?
Status of fund releases, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Tab 5.
Tab 5, really quickly, if I can draw your attention to tab 5, page 72. This is a summary of the funds we have dispersed during the calendar month of January. And so we actually did have a big run on the money, the cash that was made available in December. That's $431 million that was released. $426 million relates to the priority and funding round. So again, we've been having a high draw on the disbursements, and we actually posted about another $100 million in the last few weeks. So it's been very productive over the last few weeks. And we also have highlighted also some of the other financial information. There is a report that we generally share with you as far as the timelines, tab 74. I think that we've been watching and looking forward to those projects that are set to expire. There's a summary of that on page 74. So in February, even though it does denote that we had one project that's set to expire for $21 million, they actually did come in about last week to access their funds. So again, moving forward, there won't be money in that particular pot for rescissions. And then the large spike you see in March represents the priority of funding. That's still outstanding. So there's 146 projects for $390 million. And again, we've had about $100 million drawdown since the last few weeks. But again, encourage those folks that have outstanding priority and funding apportionments to come in by March, to come in for their cash.
Thank you.
And tab 6.
Before we go there, any public comment on tab 5? Seeing none, please proceed.
Tab 6 is our summary of the projects that you actually did approve in the consent agenda. In summary, we actually posted in the new construction category, that's tab 6, page 75. I know it's a long sheet there. In that peach color area, we actually did process one new construction project for $700,000. We have 18 modernization applications that we processed for $2.6 million. And there is a small project, or 3 projects, that really technically haven't posted just yet.
Are you on page 75?
75 on status of file, page 6. So it's about $30,000 that really small enough it didn't post, but we'll post it next month once we've accumulated additional projects for high performance. So 3 projects for $30,000 posted in Proposition 1D. In your middle category is Proposition 55. $10 billion was the original initiative. So this month we processed 14 applications for $11.3 million. In total, out of the 3 propositions, 1D, 55, and 47, we have 36 projects that were brought forward for $14.6 million. And that's financial.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Comments from public? Seeing none, move on.
Tab 7.
Tab 7. Tab 7 is the first appeal item with the SEQUOIA Elementary School, and this is a unique one in that it's a K-8, and this is neither fish nor fowl. It could go under one way and it costs us money, or this way and it's denied, or it doesn't meet the category. And I would suggest that we support the appeal, but ask staff to go and amend the regulations to address cases like this, the K-8 or the unique case that's before us. The current regulations don't seem to address what to do with cases like this, but I think it's a legitimate issue but I don't want to use it as a precedent setting. I'd rather have the regulations be clear on this. So with that, I just open it up for discussion. Ms. Moore, you have a question?
I just wanted to indicate that we would like to be involved in the development of that regulation because it has an educational impact. And I don't know if we would want to ask the implementation committee.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I wanted to send this to the implementation committee
And we have a member
specifically.
there, so
yes.
that's fine. And I'm prepared to move the alternative option of classifying the gym and multipurpose as independent entities and fund the project.
So the alternative motion is to classify for purposes of this or moving forward?
For purposes of this
For this only, okay.
project only.
For-
And
Perfect. Yes, essentially supporting the appeal, right? That get us?
we are on 7, SEQUOIA, we're moving it.
It would be a total of 174 people grants for a state share of about $4.2 million.
So I'm just curious, we're funding that then as a gym?
We're funding it as a hybrid, it's multipurpose in a gym. And
Because if you fund it as a hybrid, their multi-use room
Well,
qualify.
just tell me this, the option to how the board could approve it indicates to classify the gymnasium and multi-purpose room as an independent entity, and that's what I did based upon what staff is saying what can be done. If it needs to be done differently, let me know.
I'm just trying to ask to clarify, because when I read the documentation, it was clear that they have a multi-use room, whether it's elementary or middle school, that meets the minimum essential facilities requirement, right? It was, I believe, if I recall, it was 115% of the square footage for elementary, 85%, so it was within that range. So what we're really doing is approving this as a separate gymnasium for the school. Is that correct? I just want to clarify that.
That's correct, Assembly Member.
Because my understanding is that the Department of Education said it was a multi-use room gym, but they already have the multi-use, so we're not funding that. We're approving a gymnasium. Now, if you're attaching a gymnasium to another building, but I want that to be clear, because we don't want to come back and expand it and fund this as a multi-use expansion and then have them come back for a gym later on. Well, this is a gym that we're funding.
Correct.
Correct.
And also, we're recognizing the uniqueness of this, and then we're asking staff to go and look
Right.
so that we don't find ourselves.
Well, it's
in this
really
situation.
not unique if you're funding it as a gym, right? It would be unique if we were funding the expansion of a multi-use room. I mean, am I?
Juan?
They don't have an existing gym, so under the criteria, they qualify, but because it's not a separate facility, the
Right.
regulations don't address the expansion
The
or if
fact that you
it's...
can attach a gym to an existing
Correct.
facility, okay, so that's what we're clarifying. That's,
Okay.
I'm satisfied with that, I just wanted to be sure we were clarifying how we were doing it.
Thank you. So it's been moved by Ms. Moore. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Objections? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item 8 has been pulled. Onto action items.
Tab 9.
Tab 9. And this, go ahead.
The new construction subcommittee report.
Yeah, I was hoping, I didn't know if we want to wait till Senator Hancock gets here so we can all discuss it, or if you want me to go forward. So-
Go ahead and move forward, because I'm going to lose Senator Wyland at
Okay.
5, so
All
we
right.
can move forward.
Which one is this?
Okay.
Tab
We're on
8.
Tab 9, I believe.
9. I would not move this forward.
Tab 9, new construction subcommittee report.
So the new construction subcommittee met on three different occasions, had rather lengthy meetings and discussions. Ms. Moore attended the last one. And in those meetings, we asked for, different information to be brought forward. And the questions that we took a look at was, one, well, let me walk you through the charts first before I go through our recommendations. If you go to page 127, the reality is that we're at the end of this bond program, and we are running out of new construction dollars. And the way our developer fees work is when you are no longer able to allocate any more new construction funds, then that triggers level 3 developer fees. And given the reality that the governor does not want a facilities bond on the ballot this year, we were dealing with issues of, one, what do we do in terms of developer fees? Do we suspend level 3 developer fees? Two, the governor had in his budget proposal to add the ORG money into new construction, so we dealt with that issue. Three, do we just run out of new construction? Do we spend all of our new construction money now and then not allocate any over the next 2 years, or do we stretch out the program? And four, what do we do in terms of keeping a list of those schools that want to apply for money beyond the current bonding capacity in the bond? So if you go to page 127, and you take a look at where we are with our remaining bonding authority and where we are given our current burn rate of money, if you look at the blue chart there, if we take and actually I'm not sure this is originally based on the 143 million or if that's been adjusted downward, but if you start out with 150 million in January, we will have spent the remaining bonding authority that we have right now by April, and the new construction program will be out of money. We have more money left in the modernization program, but at that current burn rate, we're expected to be out of modernization money by October of this year. Now, it's been past practice for this board when we have critically overcrowded schools money that is not, that comes back into the program. It's been past practice to transfer that money into new construction. So based on estimates that we have, if we have approximately 200 million in critically overcrowded schools money that comes back in at the end of April, then at the current burn rate, we will extend the current new construction funding out until sometime between August and September. So you have that option and the reality that we're dealing with, and the other options are to take the money and stretch it out, limit our how much money we draw down over the next 2 years, and keep the program in place through 2014. And those charts, as you see when you go on to page 128, show how you would do that with just the one, if we were to add in the overcrowded relief grant and the critically overcrowded schools money, and if we were to do it with the drawdown based on, I believe, do we have, and if you turn the next page, that is based on the transferring only the critically overcrowded schools money. So after, lengthy discussion, we have a series of recommendations. The first is that we suspend level 3 fees through December 31st, 2014. And the belief was that if we do that, one, it doesn't penalize the building developers construction industry at a time when new housing starts are about 20% of what they were 4 or 5 years ago, and due to the fact that we can't get a bond on the ballot this year. But also by having a date certain there, we felt that would be be reason to have the development community work with us to get a bond on the ballot in November 2014, and also work with us to pass that bond so that we avoid level 3 fees altogether and we keep the program going. The second recommendation we had dealt with program preservation. And so in taking a look at the funds that are available, we have the current new construction dollars, the critically overcrowded school dollars, and the ORG, overcrowded relief grant money. We are not recommending that we transfer the ORG money into new construction at this time. After having conversations with a couple of school districts, it was clear to us that some of them have projects where they haven't submitted requests for funding yet, and we don't believe we should potentially penalize any district that's out there committing funds based on a promise that the money will be there. we are recommending that the board act as it has in the past and transfer the critically overcrowded schools money that comes back into the program into new construction. And we're recommending that we stretch out the approvals through 2014, but that we give the State Allocations Board, rather than having a specific amount each month that we would allocate, we give the State Allocations Board latitude to decide how best to do that, because we're going to have projects that come in that request different dollar amounts. We could have a facilities hardship or another critical project that comes in, and we want to give the board flexibility to make those decisions. And also, the other issue we got into with stretching out the program was the question of how do we keep the program going long-term. And as all of you know, we're in a very different economic reality right now, and we're in a very different political reality right now. And I talked to two consultants, one from Northern California, political consultants, and one from Southern California, to talk about what they believe puts us in the best position to pass a school bond in 2014. And both of them independently, without giving any opinion or anything, said they believe that it's important to keep the program going, that they believe that if we don't have a program for 2 years where we're actually allocating funds, it would be too easy for people to argue that you haven't had a program and why start a new program now? And there, of course, is a belief on some people's part that there should be school should be funded locally. You know, one of them said, Joan, he said, I think that the message needs to be that the state's running out of facility dollars and we're doing the best we can to allocate it out. We're stretching out our money, but we're having to make difficult decisions, and that message is what families are doing every day in their normal lives, but that actually puts us in a better position to pass the bond. So that weighed heavily, I know, into my decision, and I think some of the other decisions. So I could summarize our recommendations. I'd be happy to entertain questions, or I'm sure Senator Lowenthal or Senator Hagman could as well. We're recommending that we suspend Level 3 developer fees through December 31st, 2014. That we transfer any remaining critically overcrowded schools money that reverts back into the program into new construction, and that we stretch out our funding approvals through 2014. Along with that, though, we do recommend that we create a list. We don't, we want to have a list of projects that come in and probably date stamp them so that we know the need. And I think the best, it's in our recommendation, but the best way to determine how to do that, I think, is through the implementation committee, and that we do not transfer the overcrowded relief grant money into the new construction account. And my understanding is we have some technical, when we do get time, hopefully to vote, after I'm sure we'll have considerable discussion, that I think we want to take the two votes separately, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, if it's okay with you, just so we can focus the conversation, if we can take each of the recommendations separately, and that way folks can raise questions and comments could be taken from folks. If that's the will of the board, I appreciate that, just for the ease of administering the conversation. So in the first one, on the developer fees, recommend the legislature to suspend Level 3 developer fees through December 31st of 2014. Are there any comments? Has it been moved? Mr. Weiland, Senator Weiland.
Just clarification, I understand that would take legislation
Yes.
to do that.
So it's going to be, I think it'll be a recommendation to the legislature. So we can't vote to do it. It does take two-thirds, a two-thirds vote of the legislature.
And we don't know exactly how that will turn out, but I'd just like to say that I wholeheartedly concur with that. And it's the problem we've got, and I think you see it recognized nationally now with our economy, is the incredibly important role construction plays. It's one of those, it's not only the demand for housing, which is still there, but it's one of those types of economic activity that has incredible, there's a technical word, incredible expansion of the jobs that are involved. And, we've got this problem, particularly in California as in some other states. So my concern is that I actually see, because I used to be in a tangential business, I see property now that literally has no value because the cost, even though there's demand for housing, because the cost of doing all the preliminary work and building the house creates a cost that's too high to sell the house. So anything we do, you know, sometime in the past we used to say in terms of planning, yeah, you know, they're building houses like crazy. We need to make sure that we have enough money and fees for infrastructure. I'm afraid that day is past. And so I appreciate the recommendation of the subcommittee, and I just want to say I think that's crucial for trying to rebuild our economic future.
Okay. Senator Hancock.
Thank you. I am assuming that the subcommittee recommendation would not preclude a local community from imposing developer fees. And the reason I say that is that obviously developer fees were originally instituted by local communities so that somebody other than the existing taxpayers would pick up the cost of the roads and constructing the schools and other things. So in this case, the local communities would need to pick up that cost. And some of them may not feel that they would have the ability to do that. So how do you
Well, I mean,
think
for
about
all
the
those
trade-off?
districts that aren't growing, I mean, they can still levy level 1 fees, which are the statutory fees. They would still be able to assess level 2 fees. They would still be able to negotiate mitigation agreements with contractors, but they would not be able to levy the level 3 fees until after December 31st, 2014. And to piggyback on what Senator Weiland said, at our first committee hearing, we had testimony from the BIA where they presented charts and showed us that, you know, prior to the recession hitting, I believe it was, they had somewhere over 220,000 housing starts. 2/3 were single family, 1/3 multifamily. Last year they had 43,000, with 2/3 multifamily, 1/3 single family, exactly the opposite. Before the recession, you had houses that were selling for 700,000. Today, they're selling for 350,000. Out in East County, Contra Costa, which I represent, I know you don't represent them, but you're familiar with the area, they had a $4,500 fee to help pay for the Highway 4 bypass. They just cut that fee in half. They just cut the sewer fees in half, because when you have, on average, $120,000 in fees on a house that's selling for $700,000, it's pretty easy to absorb that cost. When the price of the home goes down to $350,000, it's much more difficult. So what we're doing is delaying the implementation of level 3 fees until the developers until we're able to have a bond on the ballot. Because again, I don't think we should penalize builders because we're not able to put a bond on the ballot this November.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Just one,
Senator?
just very quick comment. I think in the past, when things are going high, wide, and handsome, we thought in terms of builders and their economic interests, and as Senator Hancock pointed out, the infrastructure needs and all those. I think what they were trying to say is it's so dire that this is, the penalty would be on all of us, because we're so interconnected at the hip throughout the entire economy. And so I think that was a wise decision, and hopefully we get to a point where we're no longer in that position.
Second my motion then? That is a second.
Okay, so it's moved in second. Senator Hancock, you still have?
I do, yeah,
Okay.
and other people may have too. So I wonder if the exchange and ratio had something to do with developer fees. I mean, the idea was really a concern on the part of many people in the state about greenfield development and encouraging, again, more local community costs And it is true, I'm sure, that the fees are smaller because the infrastructure costs are less, although there are infrastructure costs in infill development. So are we inadvertently encouraging something that we had a fee to pick up the costs for? And we are, it seems to me, putting the costs back on the existing taxpayers then. So I don't know,
This doesn't affect other fees that local governments can charge. This deals with,
but don't they have to have 2/3 vote for all of them?
this has nothing to do with any of the other fees. This is only school
No, but
fees.
local government is very restricted in what it can do.
But this only deals with the.
So you take away the state money, but if you require a 2/3 vote that's impossible to get at the local level, you're in effect saying that it's not going to pencil out. I mean, I feel like I will vote for this today, but maybe not for the legislation. I'd really like to see the legislation
Okay.
as it develops.
We are only dealing with the developer fees, the fees that the developers pay the school district. We are not dealing with any of the fees that the developers pay for any of the other mitigation.
Yeah, but it
I know you want to
comes
see the
out of
language,
same
but,
pockets, that's right.
Well,
And think through
all
the
right.
downstream.
I have Mr. Lott, and then I have Senator Lowenthal.
Thank you, Chairman. I also just, obviously, I'm replacing Senator Browning, and in the conversations on this issue, she definitely supports the suspension of the level 3 fees, but still is trying to determine what the appropriate end date should be. And so I'm going to abstain on this issue, given that she's on the subcommittee that's going to continue to review this issue. So just wanted to put that for the record.
Thank you. Senator Lowenthal.
I'm just wondering, there have been some changes, I just noticed also in letters that have come in to us. Are we going to have input before?
Oh, absolutely. I just
Okay.
had a courtesy, I allowed the board members to have the first questions and clarification, and then we'll ask folks for public testimony.
Even on the subcommittee, I was torn by this. I really hear the part, and that's why I want to hear the input. I really listen very carefully and do have concerns about imposing level 3 fees at this moment. I understand that, but I also want to hear more. And I'm not totally committed like Senator Hancock. No matter what I vote today, that's a commitment to how I'm going to be voting on the floor, because in the legislature. But I wanted to move this forward. I have real concerns about imposing level 3 fees, but I really need to hear from people also.
Okay, so, Mr. Haglund.
Well, since we're all weighing in at this point, I'm looking at this program, and before this program came into effect, there was a lot of imbalance in local jurisdictions of what people paid and what didn't pay, what the needs were, and that really kind of wasn't in line at all. This program has been very successful, not that I think there's not room for improvement on it, but I truly believe if you don't implement some of these steps that we recommended for the subcommittee, then by the time we get to 2014, this program, as it exists right now, will not be functioning, and you're going to be starting over from scratch. And all the work that all the partners put into this to establish this way back when, to get it going, keep it functioning, it was important, needed. It's worked out for the most part as planned, where you had all the parties kind of put into this. This recommendation basically extends to this temporary economic time, this program as it exists, to 2014, when hopefully the time is right to put out a new bond to keep this program going. But I think once you start taking away those threats, either by the legislation, I mean, let's face it, the only thing we can do on this board is basically, the 3 recommendations is either slow down on money or not slow down on money. The rest of it's on the legislative act. But without those checks and balances in place, the whole program then the parties that came together to develop it in the first place will have to go off and start fighting each other in the legislature, and the whole thing will unravel. When you come up to, you run out of money, you won't have the support for the partnership, and in 2014, you have nothing left. So I would recommend to our colleagues here that this has been a lot of deliberation over this with all the parties involved. No one's happy with it because we just don't have the money to go where we want to, but at the same time, it's the smartest thing we could do at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagman. So why don't we have public testimony come up, please, folks?
Good afternoon. Richard Lyon on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. Thank you all very much for for the discussion. I'd like to say a lot of things, but in kind of tagging on to what Mr. Hagman said, I was at the table when we put the SB 50 program together, and it was a years-long effort to do it. It created a historic partnership between the state, between local school districts and home builders as it relates to new construction that has, over the last 12 or 13 years, in our opinion, produced the best infrastructure program the state has ever seen. And it is a partnership. Our deep concern is that if the funds are exhausted and if the trigger is pulled on level 3, which would mean even in modest jurisdictions, $25,000, $35,000, $45,000 per unit just on school fees alone, that would be the kill shot to housing, at least new construction. We are at historic lows. It's going to be very difficult to recover. And the partnership would be, at that point, dissolved. Prior to SB 50, the school facility issue was strife with litigation. And the reason we put the SB 50 program together and the partnership is because we wanted to avoid that contention and that litigation that had gone on for so many years prior to the program. There has been virtually none, save a couple here and there, over the last 12 or 13 years. It's been a smooth running program. And we encourage you to keep that partnership together. The suspension of level 3, while it may be distasteful for some of you, is a necessary option in order to maintain that partnership. If we're gone, if we're out of the funding picture, then we're back in a situation where we're fighting with school districts. They're levying fees at whatever amount they want to levy them. And we're back into the same kind of regime that we were before we put the program together. We believe wholeheartedly in this program. Our heart and soul is in this program. I have worked on every bond measure since 1988 in this state. There is every desire on the part of the home building industry to see this be a successful program. The recommendations in front of you today are our best not only substantive but political take on what it takes to hold this program together. And we urge you to adopt the 3 recommendations. And Senator Hancock, to your question about fees, we will continue to pay our full complement of school mitigation fees. The issue is, should we be forced to pick up the state's share as well? We have a 50-50 funding program where it's a state obligation and a local obligation, and we have agreed not only to pay fees but to backstop the school district if they're not able to raise 50 cents to match the state's 50 cents. And in today's economic time, because there is no possibility of getting a bond, at least that's what we understand, then through no fault of our own, we would be forced to have to come up with the state's share as well as the local share. In today's economy, at the levels we're building, in today's economic environment, I said it before, that would be the kill shot for housing in California. It's going to be difficult enough to come back. It would be virtually impossible if we had to absorb these types of fees along with the other fees that we are paying. I could go on. I think you get the gist. We encourage you to support the recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Tom Duffy for Cash, and you're going to take, Mr. Chairman, each of these items
Separately, correct.
Separately, we're just talking about the suspension.
Right, but they keep entangling themselves in my mind. Let me speak first, if I may, to the issue of running out of fees, because it's relative to what you had said, Ms. Buchanan, and that is, we talked to our pollster, and our pollster said the way to get voters is to be out of money, and that's a way to encourage them. So it was a different response.
But that's item number 3.
It is, but
You'll
I
get
meant
a chance to come back.
No, I'm not trying to double dip here. What I was trying to do was just to answer the Assembly member's question. We have never asked to pull the trigger on level 3, and we have been very respectful of the fact that there is a balance, and there's tremendous difficulty here, and we've appreciated the time and energy that the subcommittee has spent on this. The question I really ask is, it seems to me that there's a tremendous amount of support for this suspension, and I realize it's a symbolic act because the legislature will actually deal with this, and there's 6 of you that will deal with it. But you are a body that looks at schools, and you are a body that works to try to effectively marshal resources to assist schools. And I don't know that there is a balance to the opposite side of this question of the suspension. Again, it's not doublespeak to say we haven't ever lobbied any of you to pull the trigger on level 3, but at the same time we're saying we need a solution, because if indeed, as we've communicated to you, if indeed all these actions are to assist the development community, that may be very positive for the economy, but how is it positive for schools? Where do schools gain from this? And I know several of you have been board members and council members and worked at the local level. Where do schools benefit from this? And in fact, if you look at all of the issues that are before you, addressed by the subcommittee, where are the benefits? And I can't find a benefit. So that's the question. We have, and we said this at the subcommittee, we have opposed the suspension, but we haven't asked to pull the trigger. What we've believed is, with all of the minds and the hearts and the desire to make this program continue to work, that there would be something potentially in between. And I know at the one subcommittee hearing, the one prior, we said, if there's a discussion of a suspension, then we would like to be at the table for that discussion. Apparently, this is that discussion, but we've moved rather quickly to what appears to be a conclusion. So, thank you.
Thank you. I have Senator Lowenthal wanted to, and then I have an observation, and then Assemblyman Buchanan.
Well, there are a couple of things. You're saying, and I think you're raising very important issues, because I, too, am struggling. Where is this balance, and really what we do? And what do school districts get for this? And maybe this is the issue, we're making recommendations. And I hear you also saying that, and although you're only up here talking about the suspension, that you also do not support regulating how the funds go out and doing that. And so somewhere in that, if we did not support everything that's on these, if we supported suspension of the level 3 fees, but ultimately said, but we're not going to go along, we're going to listen to the school districts or cash in terms of how we regulate or not regulate, the funding, is that what you would like? Because you're saying that you're not really opposed or want to implement the level 3 fees, but yet there has to be some meaningful dialogue that really responds to the needs of school districts. So given the package that's before us, I guess what I'm asking is, could you support some parts of the package but not the other? That's all I'm saying.
And Senator, I like the way that you phrased that, because it kind of helped me in dealing with more than just the one item. We all want this economy to gain strength and move, and we believe that the housing industry certainly has been damaged and needs to come back. Schools have been tremendously damaged, and both on the operational side, as I've testified before, as well as on the capital side. We have said to you and to the development community, we want this program to continue. We believe that this program is an effective program, and we differ on the idea of stretching out the dollars. We believe that if the board were to effectively direct that a policy and regulation be put in place that would encourage and continue the accepting of applications just as they currently do while you have bonding authority. And this is something, by the way, we communicated to you in a letter last April, right. That very item. Continue the approvals beyond bonding authority. You do several things. One is you give districts the ability to recognize that the program is intact. The second thing you do is, in that recognition, they will spend money at the local level because that's part of this plan, and whatever funds they have to move their projects forward. And in doing that, we then create the third item, which is the pipeline to argue for that bond for, and I'm wearing a 2012 button because we're arguing for a bond for this year. I recognize that's not the political will necessarily, but it's certainly the will of schools. But to continue to demonstrate the need for a bond. And I think that there's something that we could negotiate, Senator, that's in there where, again, we're not wanting to damage anybody, but at the same time, are we wanting to damage schools alone? There's a three-legged stool that's been talked about this program, and that program was considered to be the state and the development community and schools. And we realize that one of those legs on that stool is now basically almost gone. And the other, the development community stool, is then gone, and we have schools, and schools are going to have to rely only on their own resources. Won't even discuss the have and have not issue here, but simply the three things I was talking about. Have districts continue to believe that the programs in existence, have them spend money to move their projects into a pipeline, use that pipeline as the argument for the next bond.
Are we talking about developer
Mr.
fees?
Buchanan.
I don't know if we're talking about developer fees or the other. And
What he's saying, I think, and just since I, well, what he is saying, what he is saying is the reason why these are separate issues, that each one has some pros and cons in those issues, and that necessarily some of us may be more committed to hearing that we do not want to put the development community, the homeowners, in a bind. That does not mean necessarily, if we did that, that we're in agreement with some of the other recommendations. That's really what he is saying. And maybe there should be some mechanism and some process that people, either before we vote today or that could reconcile some of these conflicting, because it's not simply to vote for all, if you vote for one.
And I think that's why I wanted to
My understanding is that's why we're
bifurcate this.
taking each
That's
separately.
right.
And what he's
And-
saying is it's difficult to support something like this if we're not also dealing with the acceptance, dealing with the whole application and continuing the approval process. It's hard for them to support this if they don't think that we're also going to address that. That's all.
Well, at least we know where they stand.
So I just have a question, and I was a little surprised because we've had meetings, numerous conversations. You've had lengthy discussions at the three subcommittee meetings we had. So, I just wanted, the implication that you haven't been involved is a little bit surprising to me. But beyond that, I just want to probe further. You said you are sympathetic and you don't want to impose level 3 developer fees, but yet you don't want to suspend them. So we know that housing starts are way down, and if I'm a developer, just like you want assurance, I want assurance that a program is going to be there. And if I put, 50 million or however many million I'm going to put into taking a look at a project, that I'm going to have some certainty there. So if you're not going to suspend them, but you don't want to impose them, where do you go? How do you give some sort of assurances to these developers? Because cash is very hard to get. Whether you're a developer or whatever kind of business you're in, access to capital is a major problem. How do they move forward without any kind of certainty, and where do they get their certainty out of those two options?
There may be a number of options that would be available at the local level, and I think you had commented earlier about agreements and the like. Within the provisions of the code established in 1998 is a reimbursement provision to allow a developer to be reimbursed. That certainly, and if they don't have cash and they're struggling, maybe they go to the district and they ask for an agreement. You know the role that I played in the past. I negotiated those kinds of agreements.
There's nothing without a suspension that keeps a district from assessing level 3 fees. So how do you have the assurance that level 3 fees will not be assessed? If you just say, well, we'll just figure it out or let the districts figure it out, how do you get that assurance?
I think we're talking about the switch being on or off. And what I'm saying is it'd be nice to have a dimmer switch, and possibly that dimmer switch could be part of the overall, whatever you said, he's looking to make a deal, whatever that negotiation may be, to make sure that that program continues to be in place. And maybe there is some means that if a district allows a developer to go forward and build, and there is no level 3 fee, that there's some means to be able to go back in the past and to have some assistance. I don't know what that would be, Assembly Member, but we're concerned, and I didn't want to give the impression that we didn't have access to comment. What I was talking about was, let's come to an agreement that everybody, the developers, schools, and all of you are going to be satisfied with. Where would we be on that? I think if there is indeed, as I was saying to you before the meeting began, a program where we have the ability to recognize that the state is out of money, but that the access to the programs, the processing to the certainty that you know that you've qualified for that time in the future when the state has.
Right.
And I know you've suggested that go to the IMP committee, and I like that idea, because you'll get to hear more details, more of the grit. But it's not an easy answer. And again, what I'm saying to you is, where do schools benefit by all of this? You're a body that doesn't look after developers, you look after schools.
I can tell you where I think schools benefit from this. One is, if you do everything you can to keep this program in place so that when we have the opportunity for the next bond, whether we're fortunate and we have a special election in 2013 or we have to wait till 2014, we do all we can to put ourselves in the best position to pass that bond. Schools benefit because long-term, we haven't had the kind of construction program in schools that we've had the last decade in multiple decades. And I know that firsthand as a school board member, because my district, it took us 3 times to pass our first bond requiring a 2/3 election. If I recall correctly, it took Fresno 5 times to pass the bond before the program. And we used to go in and half our elementary schools put sheets of plastic on the computers because they were in such poor shape. So this is a great program that we have to preserve. And of course, you and I think, disagree on how we do that. But I think the issue here is not just facilities. If you're sitting on a school board, you're concerned with your facilities, but you're also concerned with your day-to-day operations of your schools. You're concerned in terms of as far as your class size, whether you have counselors, whether you have libraries open. And basically what the governor is telling us, and I support what he's telling us, is that I need a clean ballot because that will give me the best opportunity to pass his temporary revenues. And when you take a look at schools, that right now the deficit factor is over 20%. I have, 14, 15, 16 school districts in, and that what I'm hearing from our superintendents is, I don't know if we have to take another $360 cut, if we're going to still be solvent, So what we're doing is we're saying right now the most important priority for us as a state is to get those temporary revenues passed so we can stop the bleeding in our schools. And it does mean we're going to be waiting a little bit on the bond. And I don't want to do that. I'd like to see the program continue going. But I believe that is the right strategy. And if we're going to do that, to penalize developers because we don't have a bond on this ballot and to potentially shut down construction anymore doesn't make any sense to me. And I think you just get to look at the construction side, and I appreciate that because that's what your job is. But when I take a look at the whole picture in schools and what's at stake here, I support the governor wanting the clean ballot and wanting to get those temporary revenues passed, because I think it's really important. Just like if you're in a school, passing that first bond sometimes is the hardest, but once people start to see the quality of schools you're producing, then they're more receptive to passing the second or the third bond. And I think you've got to give some kind of certainty to the development community that they can continue to go forward. It doesn't mean that they can't even at level 2 fees have agreements to front end the cost of the school, knowing that they will then get reimbursed when the state passes the next bond, just like a school district would on a modernization project. But that's, I think, where our fundamental agreement is. And I don't think we can say, well, it'll just work itself out, because I think there needs to be more certainty than that.
Let me go to Mr. Hagman, and then Senator Wyland.
This is maybe a side point, but I was just curious. You said that we're at record levels of operation and infrastructure building for school districts, and I can see the operational side. Can you point to a time period in the recent decades that there's been a better successful program, a more widespread for the state of building and rebuilding schools? Because my recollection, this is probably the best that deal that schools has had the last 9-10 years of being forward and building these things. But you made that comment that wasn't, so I'm just trying to figure out one was better.
I'm not sure that I or certainly didn't intend to say that the program wasn't a good program. We believe the program is a good program, and the program has been funded mightily since 1998 with the bonds from 98, 2002, 4, and 6. The program existed before, and it was a program that was an effective program. We didn't have all of the same level of bonds because the legislature was more, they were more careful in putting that before the voters. But this program has been a very, very good program. So we're not troubling with the program. We want to keep it intact. Part of what I was trying to communicate was that if indeed if the board does what we'd like, you would establish the ability to have a district be approved for a project, even though you don't have any bonding authority for that. Again, that's what we communicated last April, and that there would be a list for gaining support for the future bond. But no, we like the program, Mr. Hagman.
Okay. Senator Wiley.
I'd just like to go back and clarify something that I think it's important for all of us to bear in mind. When you say, where do schools gain? And you say, well, this particular industry's been damaged, and Senator Lowenthal said, no, devastated. This is no longer years and years ago when I started in the legislature in 2001. And you could say developers, and a lot of people conjure up, these guys who were, just building like crazy and making tons of money and et cetera, et cetera. This is different. I'll tell you what schools gain. Schools are nowhere without a strong economy. And somehow schools have to understand that they're part of this whole thing. That's why nationally they report statistics on housing starts, because it is one of those key industries. It would take an hour to actually describe the economic effects of that building. So this is not somehow helping developers versus not helping developers. This is really about trying to help the economy and help schools gain that little bit they have. If developers, I can't tell you how many I know who are gone, busted, bankrupt. It's done. And schools are paying that price. When I have school boards come and talk to me, and we struggle with our bonds in the same way, had to do some very low-cost construction in order to be able to build anything, I tell them the single biggest thing they can do, because our pie is so shrunk, is help us come up with ways of getting this economy going. We all know it. We know it's happening nationally. So this isn't really about, I don't think, developers per se. This is about the context of how there will be money for schools at all. That's the way I think we have to look at it. Now, I'm agnostic on whether we keep the program going or not. I've supported, just so you know, I've supported every single bond that's come before the legislature. There's not a school bond in my life that I haven't voted for, even though I know sometimes there's some waste, et cetera, et cetera. And I know when you've had to go back and then you appoint a committee to demonstrate that you've spent the money correctly, et cetera, et cetera. But if this is going to be dependent upon our overall economy, and when we talk about trying to clear the ballot, et cetera, it's because people are so disinclined in this environment. Schools, as well as all the other things we want to fund, that we funded so generously when I first got here, we can't until we restore this economy. So I think the discussion is less in terms of, are we going to somehow help developers and somehow, not get much for schools, as it is a way to keep something going. I'll support the school bond whenever we come up with it, whenever we can get it out there. But I think this is, and Assemblymember Buchanan has essentially stated this in various ways, and Assemblymember Hagman, and I know we've heard also from the senators on this issue. When you build, I guess I'm emotional about it because I know people individually who've lost everything personally, because what happens in the actual world, even from pretty big ones, is you sign a personal guarantee. And what did they do when they were making a lot of money? They bought more land. Guess what? The land's worthless. And I know plenty of them who are now living in multi-unit housing because they are done. So this is more, I think, and I think this is what I hear the committee chair saying of the subcommittee, is preserving something for a period of time. That's what this is about. And that's what not only schools, but social services, but every aspect of our government needs. So I'll stop there, but I think we have to see this not as some isolated group. We're joined at the hip in every way.
Thank you, Senator. Eric?
And with that, I would like a vote sooner rather than later.
One more public person, and then I think one more, I don't know, but we got to open it for public comments. Go ahead, sir.
Try not to take up too much time. I know we have 3 more subjects to discuss, so at this rate it might be a little while. But Eric Bach with Los Angeles Unified. Our position on this is, first of all, we strongly support the suspension of level 3 developer fees. We look at this from a perspective of what's in the best interest for schools and all of our partners. Right now, the developers have clearly taken a hit this economic climate. They can't afford another hit if we were to go to level 3 developer fees, and that doesn't serve us all, school districts included, in trying to pass a 2012 or 2014 bond. It just does not put us in a very good position when one of our major partners is no longer a partner. So we look at it from the perspective that we need to protect everyone and look at it as a whole. And we look at the other 3 issues, and I don't want to impose upon double dipping or triple dipping here, but they are fairly much entwined. But we look at all of the issues that are going to be discussed later as one issue, and that is, how do we better position ourselves for 2014? And this is just one piece of that puzzle. So we're supportive of a suspension. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Yes.
Mr. Chair, members, Cesar Diaz on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. Based on the testimony you already heard, I'm not going to repeat, but we're strongly supportive of Assemblymember Buchanan's proposal here, and just wanted to express that to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Lowenthal. Hancock. Wyland. Buchanan. Hagman. Almanza.
Abstain.
Moore. Reyes.
I'm going to abstain. What's the vote now?
5. Ayes. 3 abstain.
Okay, so we need Senator Lowenthal?
We can hold it open for Senator Lowenthal.
Okay, let's hold it open for Senator Lowenthal. And right now, can we just go ahead and, Senator Lowenthal just stepped out. I was going to say, let's go and get the absent members, but he's out. But we have, Okay, Senator.
I apologize, I actually have to go meet with some educators that I promised to meet with, so.
Thank you, Senator.
I appreciate the chair's work and want to be helpful on the board. I appreciate the subcommittee has obviously done a lot of work on this, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Senator. Yes. Deny? Thank you. The next is the, yes. We don't have anything on ORG bond authority transfer. The next issue is the regulation of the remaining bond authority. And we heard the issues. Are there any comments or questions from the board members?
Yes.
I move the board recommendation.
Senator Rosenthal moves the board recommendation?
No, we're not doing org.
Oh, we're not doing org?
No. This was,
I have a comment.
okay,
It's just gone?
it's gone. Then we're not going to deal with it.
All right, so that's what I was about to vote on that. It just says
Okay.
one vote. Thank you.
All right. So we're moving on to regulation of remaining bond authority. Is there a motion? Ms. Buchanan moves. It's been seconded, and we have comments. Go ahead, have a seat, and we'll go to comments. Ms. Moore.
We will not be supporting the slowing down of bond authority process as it negatively affects students, school districts, and job creation. Once districts receive authority, they have a better option to locally forward fund projects with an official unfunded approval. Risks are reduced and interim financing is more readily available. It reduces the amount of projects also that are ready for cash when the state sells bonds, and therefore also potentially slows down needed construction and modernization of schools and job creation. It artificially reduces demand. It slows the development of an unfunded list, which we also support. We cannot begin an unfunded list until we are out of funding. There is no evidence that a bond that still has funding left will garner better voter support of a bond. Actually, both the existing polls and prior history would support otherwise. That there is demonstrated need and the state is out of funding is a more compelling argument to me as a voter. Also, our superintendent of public instruction believes that the board has managed and will continue to manage the program, both efficiently providing authority for projects, also sends a strong message to voters. We have taken care of developers' concerns regarding level 3 with our previous vote, and we believe district and community concerns should also be addressed to move projects forward and continue the program with unfunded approvals. And for these reasons, we will not be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes, public testimony.
Susan Stewart, Stewart and Associates, representing several school districts around the state. Of the 4 recommendations, this one is of most concern to school districts I've talked to. There are districts who've been on this list for a very long time, and adding 2 years or 2.5 more years to their waiting period would be devastating. There are many reasons why it creates chaos. One is agency approval. DSA approvals are good for 1 year with 1-year extensions. CDE approvals are good for 2 years. If we start adding a year, 2 more years to these projects, it would create chaos. Costs are going to increase. The economy is improving, albeit slowly, and we anticipate housing costs are going to increase. But as important, school districts are often the largest employers of people in the community, including union jobs. And if you delay these projects, you're going to delay jobs, you're going to delay impact on the community. Just as an example of one small school district, Pittsburgh Unified School District since 2006 has had $150 million in school facilities projects. Delaying that by a year or 2 is not going to help the economy. It's not going to create any better conditions for passing a new job. The prior system of the exhausting bond authority and using an unfunded list has worked. It's created need, and it has not been an impediment to passing a new bond. We believe metering out the money would create more problems than it would solve. When bonds are sold, we encourage you to fund complete projects on the unfunded list until bond funds are exhausted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Bakke again with Los Angeles Unified. We agree with many of the points that Susan stated. I think we just want to highlight that it's a hard debate. I think we all want to do what's right, and we all we think we are doing what's right. And I don't know if we necessarily know how things are going to turn out in the future bond. But we do know is that when you look at what happened when we passed Prop 47, the item actually, the board agenda actually provides all the background on this. When we were looking at new construction and modernization under Prop 98, we ran out of modernization funds in September of 2000. We ran out of new construction money in January of 2001. We ran about 18 months without either new construction or modernization, which is about what we're talking about going into when we're talking about a 2014 bond, the same basic time period when you look at some of the projections that we're talking about. 47 was passed with a very strong support. I think it's been proven that not having a bond or exhausted our bond authority isn't a detriment, but it actually proved that it was actually quite helpful in supporting a future bond initiative. So I just think that there's other ways of looking at this. I think this is a conversation that we should still continue to have, and I think in that respect, I think there's still some time to continue that conversation, but if it means another subcommittee, I think we would support that, but our position is that we would like to see that the money go out, the consistency with the school districts, keep projects moving, keep jobs created, is probably at this point in time the most important thing that we can do in California.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Tom Duffy again for cash. We've communicated before, and I certainly in my prior testimony a few minutes ago said the same thing, that we believe exhausting the funds really is a way to communicate to the voting community that we need a bond. Eric talked to you about those recent times in the past decade when we ran short of funding and what occurred. We had the experience, and I think I said this subcommittee, in 1992, we had a bond. In 94, we had a bond failure. Didn't have another bond until 96. It was an overwhelming success, and we had been dry for a period of 4 years. So we believe exhausting the authority and the funds is not a negative, but a positive for pushing forward with a future bond. Also, we're concerned about the technical nature of what the term that has been used as metering. We've used the term rationing of funds would do, and we believe that there are unintended consequences that may be very negative. So we would ask that you not do that. Just run through the funds and the authority until they're exhausted. As I think was aptly said by Ms. Moore, the issue of the emergence of level 3 is taken care of with your action, if that action is supported by the legislature, and from what we're understanding that probably would occur. So there is no need to meter or ration these funds for purposes of protecting against level 3. We think that it would be negative on the program, and I'll wait until the next item if you want to talk more, but thank you very much, and we just urge you not to move forward with this rationing.
Thank you.
Anna Ferrer with the County School Facilities Consortium. I won't go into repeat what's already been said. We very much agree with the statement of Ms. Moore and would very much be opposed to this recommendation, and ask you to recall, we're talking about metering out projects, but no one's metering out the kids as they come in to the schools in the coming year or two. So we're really believing that at this point, metering out projects is going to mean delays that will cost more later, and it's the students that will suffer for that. So we are opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Lyon, California Building Industry Association. We are here in support of the proposal. There's arguments on both sides, and it's really a judgment call. And the question is, what puts us in the position to best demonstrate to the public that the program has been implemented in the most cost-efficient way possible. And we're in very difficult times, and there's no question that the public sees what goes on under this dome in a fairly skeptical light. We do have the ability, under very difficult times, when dollars are very short, to demonstrate that even under those difficult circumstances, you can make this program operational and keep it active and keep it functioning. The governor has indicated that he would like to do this. We all want to see this administration succeed, and we really want to be able to see the next bond succeed. So again, this is a judgment call in terms of how you best position the program to be able to demonstrate to the public that it's done everything it humanly can to be able to use dollars and spend dollars efficiently. So we support the proposal for those reasons.
Thank you. Mr. Hagman?
Thank you. And I want to remind us on the SAB board that these recommendations, the only thing we have authority to do right now is this particular thing we're voting on today. That's the only authority. Everything else takes legislative authority. And being around like we all have on the legislature, know that this thing is not going to come around real quick. So as we suggest level 3 funding be suspended and make that recommendation to the legislature, but if we don't do this metering or spreading out and being good stewards of this program, and then the legislature takes 9 months to the rest of the year to figure out when it wants to do level 3 suspension or not. It can't take that long. We can de facto basically go against what we're trying to accomplish here by just letting those funds run out. Because at the current rate, they'll be out by June, in many cases, April. Okay, do we really think this legislature is going to pass the other things between now and April to give some kind of guarantee that that's the direction we're going? I can't agree that our colleagues on the other committees are going to necessarily see things in the same light that we may or may not see it here. This is something that we've had the biggest growth and the most construction in schools over the last 8 years than probably 40 years. Okay, to slow down this program, that's what we're talking about, slowing it down and being good stewards of this bond money to last it, to make sure the program is continuing to go, I think is very, very responsible for us to do as a board, the one that sees most of this information to go forward. All the previous examples of the bond issuance has been during much, much better economic times when you had someone to point at and say, these guys are making a lot of money, we could sit there and pull them in, we could do this and that, and it was much better economic times than what we have right now. We cannot say the same thing under any circumstance. I read all the same polls. I'm the elections chair for our side of the world. This is going to be a hard time to get anything passed this November, and the more you crowd it up, the less like it's going to be. So what do you want to do? You want to let this run out in April, then come back in 2014 and say we need this? Or do you want to sit there and be conservative and draw this program, as other testimony before was smaller amounts of bond over the previous years? This has been a huge boom for school construction over the last 8-9 years. And to show to the public that we can be fiscally good stewards with their bond money, with their tax dollars, and slow this down a little bit, I think is the smartest way for us to go.
Thank you. Senator Lowenthal.
Yeah, I voted for this with the understanding that I needed to find out more. I wanted to see the whole package and to understand the political issue. And I think it's a valid argument, that is, that it will, by doing this, it will help us pass a future bond. So that's one issue. The second issue was to avoid level 3 developer fees to do that. I was very pleased to say the other. And then the third one was to preserve the program and to keep the staff on. Those were the three.
I was struck with the bipartisan support to suspend developer fees. I think that's a very good sign that Democrats and Republicans voted to suspend, to recommend to the legislature to suspend the developer fees. And I think that's a strong bipartisan state. We don't do a lot of bipartisan issues like that around. So I think that's a strong thing, especially for Democrats, to be voting to suspend fees that were agreed upon. But I agree with the arguments that were put forth to do that. So having already done that, I was now checking with people, and I keep getting different opinions. Assemblymember Buchanan mentioned Gail Kaufman, and I also talked to Dari Schrago and to John Fairbanks and to people in the district, and I get different opinions, whether in fact it's best to have it run out or not. Dari Schrago agrees with Gail Kaufman. Others do not agree with that, who have run campaigns. I listened to the districts, and because we've taken such a strong stand on suspending level 3, which I think was the critical issue for me, was to suspend developer fees in this economic climate. And the others were more, it was a political decision, what's the best way. I cannot now support this proposal. I do not mind running out, letting districts move forward, having, and I go further than even recommendation number 4, but we'll get to that, what we really need to do. So I will not be supporting this recommendation.
As a chair, I usually just listen in and not weigh in until the final vote comes in and folks know where I'm at on an issue. On this one, I think the importance of it is, Assemblymember Hagman points out, is by the time the legislation moves in its chapter, we will be out of money if we don't slow down the output. That simple. I've worked in the building for almost 11 years, and there are very rare pieces of legislation of critical importance that can move in a few days. This is not going to rise to that level, particularly since it would require a 2/3 vote. And notwithstanding the bipartisan support in this chamber right now, I think it's hard to tell what will happen to that piece of legislation, to which I abstain from voting on. And that's the only concern that I do have, is that even if you were able to get legislation through, I don't think it comes in a timely manner. But that's just my take. Councilmember Buchanan.
Yeah, I told someone, I said, if the consultants would have said, doesn't make a difference, then I would say, let it run out. I guess what strikes me is I think we're in very different economic times today. Eric cited other times when we suspended, but if you take a look at what the unemployment rate was those two times, it was 4.9, 5.4, and 4.9%. In 2006, we were riding at the height of the housing bubble. And so when you take a look at the other times, never were we in the kind of economic times that we are today, where we're still at double-digit unemployment, and we don't know exactly where that's going to be. When you take a look at a chart, this is from, I think it's from the LAO, and what's going to happen with debt service. Debt service is going to take up a bigger part of our budget 2 years from now than it is today. So I think it really gets down to, do you believe that you'll be in a better position to pass a bond if you still have a program or not? And I do, which is why I'm voting that way. I also have a couple of questions for Pedro, because the other reason I'm voting that way is, we fund staff through the bond proceeds. And when we run out of money in September, April in terms of new construction, in September, if we have $200 million that comes from critically overcredited schools or earlier, where do you think the governor's going to give us general fund money to continue processing applications? I don't know where we're going to get that. I know we're going to have to spend some money on audits and that kind of follow through, but I don't know where we have the money to, when we're making the kind of cuts we are in the budget. When you take a look at the cuts to health and human services and all that, I don't know if we're going to get general fund money to fund processing of applications for a bond that doesn't exist, for a program that doesn't exist. And I think the way to keep this program going is to stretch it out with the flexibility that if you need to spend more 1 year, 1 6-month period or quarter, whatever, we have that flexibility to do that. But where we stretch it out over the 2 years, we continue to accept applications, we continue to accept a list, and the program is still in place. And, you know, good people can disagree. But if I honestly believe that we would be in better position politically to pass it, then I would say spend it. But what I do want to say is there's a reality here that I don't think anyone truly is facing or understands, and that is the program is out of money. You know, I don't know exactly if we cobbled together the votes or not, but from September, chances are from September 2012 at a minimum, could be longer than that, to November 2014 or January 2015 when you can sell bonds, there will be no funds. If something comes up in the interim, if all of a sudden you have a problem with a facility, you won't have any flexibility, any kind of emergency to take care of that because the money will be gone.
Thank you. Call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Moore, you had a question. I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Okay, Ms. Moore.
I just have two final points on our part. One is that the critically overcrowded school funds, as I understand, there's no opposition that those most likely would be placed to the program, which means that the estimation for when we would be out of funds would be October of 2012. Is that correct?
I think the chart shows September.
Well, out in October. I think we're still funding in September. Is that correct?
That's if the $200+ million moves over.
Okay. And then the second point that I would make is that we are simply not slowing down the authority. We actually are slowing down and have been slowing down for some time, the cash. And that will continue to happen as we only have 2 periods per year now that we have cash infusions, and that is if the administration and treasurer and all those folks that are looking at our debt service, how we will issue, if we will issue bonds. Last year we issued once. This year we've issued once so far. And so the program will continue to need to have those cash pieces to actually continue to fund projects. And that will probably be occurring over the next 2 years, because I don't see where we're going to issue bonds all of a sudden and take care of all of the authority needs in this program. And so those are
down to $143 million in new construction, potentially a maximum of $243 if $200 million comes back. There is not much money left.
Senator Lowenthal.
Yeah, one of the things I need to understand, what I'd like to understand is why the microphone is not working. No, besides that, is that we have decided not to transfer any of the overcrowding ORG money relief. So given that, when do we anticipate that money running out? This is not the new construction. When do we anticipate the overcrowding relief grant money running out?
I believe our projection that we presented at the new construction sub may have been past 2014, 2015.
So there will be money in that.
For the overcrowded relief.
Just the overcrowding relief.
I think there's a little over a year left, as I recall.
No, there's 200, I think.
It's actually about $225 million that's still in play.
The reason I'm saying that is you're saying, well, where are we going to get the money to administer the program? We took an action, which I did not really agree with, the last session, and when we passed the funding to take all the administrative costs for the last 4 years and take it out of the overcrowded relief. We took $73 million to pay for all administrative funding. It was a footnote that said, transfer the appropriation per the Budget Act for administrative costs for fiscal years 08-09, 9-10, 10-11, and 11-12 from modernization to overcrowded relief. So we took all that money out of overcrowded that we needed to spend because there was money in that grant. And I personally think that should have been discussed by the board, but the board decided that was not to be discussed to do that. Having said that...
Actually, Senator, it was brought up during the executive committee today, so that happened.
But having said that, the issue that you've raised is where are we going to get the money to administer this? We've already had precedent that we've taken the money out of the ORG to administer it, so we could do that again. So we will have enough money to administer the program if it runs out.
Chris Ferguson, Department of Finance. We actually estimate ORG to be out by December of this year. Our initial conversations with Los Angeles Unified School District is that they are preparing a number of applications to come in the preceding year, and as such, that program itself will be out of funding as well.
Okay. And I see Eric.
You're now anticipating by December of 2014, 12?
2012.
Mr. Hagman.
And just not to belabor the point, but I think we did have consensus on this board that we didn't want to see level 3 triggers be in place. By definition, if this board runs out of bond or authority to fund things, that bylaw right now kicks in. That's agreeable, right?
We would, the board would have to do a resolution acknowledging that there are not sufficient funds.
Okay, but you
That
basically
would
state
occur,
an
yes.
obvious, we run out of funds, you have to do that. At the bare minimum, I don't see the issue of, right now, given the recommendation to the staff to slow things down until the legislature passes level 3 suspension.
Senator Lowenthal?
Are you listening to this, please?
What Mr. Hagman is suggesting?
Excuse me, what did you?
What I'm saying is this is an on-the-go move. Whatever we do today as this board, we can sit there and change next month, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and say, we don't want to ration no more. We have a different call. I'm very concerned about getting 2/3 vote to suspend level 3. And we all agreed we don't want to see level 3 kick in. Okay? We cannot guarantee legislative actions. What I'm saying right now is if we take these recommendations, and now the legislature, 3 months from now, 6 months, at the end of the year, passes level 3 suspension, and it becomes law, then we come back, just as easy, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, come back as a board and say, hey, that protection now is there, okay? And we have projects ready to go. We want to empty all this money out and get it out as fast as we can and get a new list going. That's something we still have retained authority on at any time. Any board meeting, we can sit there, put it on an agenda, speak about it, talk about it. But we can't guarantee the action of our colleagues. And that's what we're assuming, that this recommendation from this board is going to suspend level 3 to make these next 2 recommendations. I don't have the same confidence, not with this kind of high threshold and how long things take. So if we put that off and all of a sudden we're out of bonds, then de facto level 3 kicks in. We have to sit there and make the resolution, and everything that we agreed upon right here is not in play. The only way we guarantee that happening is to give staff some indication to slow things down. And if we do our job in the legislature and get a separate bill out and pass it out as quickly as we can, great. I think everybody in the audience agrees, everyone's for and against slowing this down and everything else, said that level 3, we don't want to see that triggered in this cycle, okay? So how about we sit there and right now for this month or this board meeting and say, look, we're not going to spend this money this month anyway. Let's do our job in the legislature, get this thing going, but slow things down enough so we have a guarantee that level 3 will not trigger in, and that the pressure to put something on the ballot for this November is not going to be there by the legislature or anybody else, and we can sit there, and if we get that passed, the sooner the better. We come back in this body and say, okay, release whatever we have left. Okay, by then we have a clearer picture. There's not so many undefined unknowns at that point. So we can stay slowed down for the next couple of months, like you were going to put it out to 2014 if you had to. Okay, that slows things down. We just put $1 billion on the street last month. Okay, it's a lot of bond money. We can sit there and drag this out for a few months till we get the indication from the legislature where we go.
I think that's a great argument, and I don't want to engage in a colloquy with you, but I think that if we slow down and regulate, there's no reason for the legislature to get into suspending, because they don't have to get into that issue, because we're doing it through the regulatory process by continuing to slow down and have it through the. I think by doing it this way, we put pressure on the legislature now to have to deal with this issue. I think we do best when we have pressure on us. I think that by saying that the only way we're going to protect level 3 developer fees is by the legislature acting, then it's our responsibility to deal with that. I don't think we're going to deal with anything if there's not pressure on us.
Ms. Moore, and Ms. Moore, and then Ms. Buchanan. Oh, Senator Hancock, too.
What I understand what you're proposing. We could also propose that we have estimations when we move critically overcrowded schools that the program runs through October, and perhaps we revisit this issue in October. But I still, having voted for the suspension recommendation, we still cannot support also slowing down the program.
Ms. Buchanan, then Senator Hancock.
Can I just ask a question? If you've run out of money in October, how do you revisit spreading out money? It's gone. Well, I mean, it's the chart shows between August and September, but if you've run out of money, how do you revisit distributing it?
Looking at when you run out of the money. First of all, we don't really, it's all estimations. Frankly, I've been hearing estimations about when we were going to run out of funding for some time, and it has not occurred at those times that we thought we were going to run out of funding. I still think if it looks like the legislature isn't going to pass it or whatever at the time that we no longer have funds, or approaching the time that we no longer have funds, which is estimated to be October right now, anybody on this board can ask for something to be revisited.
Senator Hancock.
Okay. Because I've been struggling with this too, and I've talked with Assembly Member Buchanan and others. I really have two concerns. One is building schools and jump-starting the economy. That's one of the reasons I voted for the level 3 fee item that just came up. But building schools, jump-starting the economy, helping the students. The other is the platform for a new bond. And I guess I don't understand, when we say preserving the program, if we're not giving out the money we have to build schools, it seems like we're preserving the staff. And we will preserve a great deal of the staff anyway if we're processing things, if we're getting rescissions, if we're winding down. But frankly, if I were running a campaign against the school bond, I'd use that as an argument against it. It does seem to me that the people who've suggested that the pressure comes from saying, we had a great program, we built beautiful schools, and we have no more money, that's when you actually build the support for the bond. So I feel like right now I have to come down on that, with that position in support of.
Ms. Buchanan,
the only thing I will tell you is I think for local districts, it's easier to pass their bonds if there's a state program in place than if you're talking about passing a local bond, but you don't know if you're going to have any kind of matching funds. But I still would like to ask the question, if we run out of money, this chart shows between September, or August and September, whatever, October, whenever, and if we're out of overcrowded relief funds by the 1st of next year, I just want to know, where are we going to get the money to continue to process applications and keep a list? And I think with both of you being in the Department of Finance, maybe you can.
I don't believe the general fund will step in. Given the demands in the general fund, that's not a viable option.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to make this preface. I wish I had the confidence that my senator colleagues have in the legislature doing the right thing in a quick and timely basis. My experience hasn't been that way so far. And if not these recommendations, then I will probably preface my saying that these nice consent calendars of spending these dollars and authorizing new things, I'll probably be voting no on most of those in the future until we get that passed. And this is a 2/3 vote that needs to happen at the legislature. We can put a rush on that. We can make it very quickly through the legislative process if the will is there. But what I'm hearing from you is you much rather take that chance than see, that the level 3 be protected, and which I think has a much more harmful effect on school funding, both from the operational side, the conference, all the rest of it. And we need to have some sense of that security, I believe, going in the future. Otherwise, the developers aren't going to be sitting there buying the property, developing the starts, all the rest of it, which, especially after realignment of redevelopment monies, go to the schools. A lot of that stuff goes directly to the school's operation. So we're cutting our nose off to spite ourselves based on this argument that we can basically put on hold for a couple months. With the big bond issuance we just had, we do not have to make this decision today, granted, but we can give recommendations to urge the legislature to pass this immediately with 2/3 and get this in and out and take that issue off the table. Then it's much easier to say, hey, let's make this list and spend the money. But until then, if we don't have something in place, and we think the regular course of business and the legislature is going to go on to do this, I think it puts this whole balance of what the subcommittee did in jeopardy.
Senator Lowenthal.
I just wanted to ask Assemblymember Buchanan, we've heard from a number of school districts, whether it was Cash, whether it was Ms. Stewart, and others, my own districts, that I've heard, who do not support regulating it. We've heard. Why haven't we heard from it? If what you're saying is for school districts, it's much easier if the program's in place. Why haven't any school districts come forward and said that?
I don't think most school districts are aware of it, to be honest with you. I know that I've talked to some that were planning on bonds around me, and I said, you need to know that we probably will not have a state bond on the ballot until 2014. So if you're planning out your programs, you should plan them out in a way that you may not get matching funds till 2015, and it was a complete surprise to them. So, yes, we have some organizations here, and they do have their client districts, but I think if you took a look at the 1,000 districts in the state, most of them, there hasn't been a dialogue that's gone on with all of them. And like I said,
haven't heard from any of them that want this.
I don't. The ones I've had regular classroom cabinet meetings, and none of them are aware of it. There's some. Until Margie Brown was our director, we didn't follow the State Allocation Board as closely. We knew when we had an item coming up, but that was all we did. So I can't speak for all the districts. But I will tell you that when we've had school bonds, and I've been very involved with ballots, that one of the big selling arguments is you've got state matching funds there, and there's a state program, and there will be no state program there.
I hear that argument.
Right,
it's very powerful.
I know.
I just would have liked to have heard from any school.
Like I said, but I haven't. And we're hearing from finance that if there's not bond money, if we're out of bond money at the first of the year, and there's not money to process applications, it's not going to come from the general fund. So I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer.
Right.
I'm just going on based on what I believe is right, and I think I have tremendous respect for you, and know you're going to vote based on what you believe is right. But like I said, between my conversations with the consultants, between my conversations in terms of how do we pay to continue to process these claims. My belief is that you stretch it out, and it's, we can certainly disagree.
Mr. Hagman, then I'd like to call the roll.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think back to the senator's argument that the legislature will not have the pressure to pass this quickly if we don't run out of money. I think one of the things we could do to assure that is we get all these partners who want this money out in the streets tomorrow to join with us to put that pressure on the legislature. Senator? I'm sorry, I'm directing one of your questions, one of your points, sir. You stated that if we take the pressure off, the legislature may not act as quickly if the pressure's on, if we run out of funds for that.
I will tell you, if in fact we have done it by regulating, and that means that we will not run out, and so we don't have to vote on this issue, that takes the pressure off the legislature.
I think there's a great coalition in this room and elsewhere that wants to see this money go on the streets as quickly as possible. And I think one of the ways we could assure that and still assure that level 3 funding is protected, is to slow it down until that's packaged and have them come lobby the legislature to say, get this thing passed tomorrow. And that would be the quickest way to do it, to get them out and use their pressure out there.
I hear you. That's, I mean, I just don't know. I'm just saying, you know.
Okay, call the roll.
Lowenthal? Hancock? Laura? Buchanan? Hagman? Almanza?
Aye.
Moore?
No.
Reyes?
Aye.
Does not pass.
Thank you. The next recommendation is future acceptance and processing funding applications. Any questions from board members before we bring up public testimony? Okay. Public testimony, please.
Mr. Chairman, members, Tom Duffy again for cash, and I'll be repeating myself in that I've noted this board before you, I think, twice today, that we believe that a continuation of processing of applications as you currently are processing them, as they're brought to the board as for unfunded approvals, is the appropriate way to act into the future, even after you run out of authority. And again, we communicated that last April because we anticipated we get to this time. We think that that's wise for a number of reasons. One that we have noted for you is already that it continues to encourage districts to come in for the program and spend money and move on with the repair of our economy and creating a pipeline for the future to support the bond. One that I did not note for you is that you have taken great pains and have carefully implemented a program to oversee labor compliance with new legislation. That came through statute. That statute had in it a provision that 1/4% of state bonds would be the benchmark for identifying what would be paid to the Department of Industrial Relations. We believe that if a school district is to continue to move forward with a project in the absence of state funds, having knowledge of what that project would be in terms of the amount gives them the ability to then estimate what their cost is, or determine actually what their cost is, that 1/4%, pay DIR and move on with their project, and thereafter, according to your regulations, to be able to come in and seek a reimbursement, having complied with that law. So we think that that's something new that is added into this that we didn't consider last April because we weren't really focused on that. But we would encourage you to have, and I really like Ms. Buchanan's suggestion that the implementation committee look at this means, if I'm understanding that suggestion accurately from our conversation. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Any comments or questions? Oh, yes, sorry.
Anna Ferrer with the County School Facilities Consortium. We met actually earlier today, and this was the one recommendation that we really felt was a good one to make the case for a bond in the future, so we would be supportive of that recommendation.
Okay.
I just have a
Ms. Moore.
I see that the recommendation is to have the implementation committee develop and staff develop the details of this list. And what I would ask, and I guess want to hear in discussion, is can we have the option considered within that discussion of a true unfunded list? I actually think the value of a true unfunded list, having lived with them in the past, having done interim financing on them in the past, there's always the risk that there's never another bond ever, and districts have that risk. But knowing that they have had the approvals of the Office of Public School Construction, the Department of the Division of State Architect, and the Department of Education, and were it not for money or for funding, they would be an approvable project. goes a long way at the local level to be able to maybe forward fund a project with the thought of reimbursement in the future, knowing all the risks that are associated with that. So I would ask that we, in the consideration of this at the implementation committee level, not rule that potential out immediately. So in supporting the unfunded list, I would ask that we have the implementation committee and staff look at all options concerning that and bring them back to the board.
Esteban?
So we had talked about accepting applications and keeping track of the amount of funding that's being requested without actually approving it for funding, not having an unfunded list, but still reporting on the backlog of funding for applications. Is that what we're talking about here in this recommendation? But not bring it for approval if there's no funding?
So let's go this methodically then. I'll take it as a motion by the subcommittee.
I want to make
Okay.
some comments. My concern with having a true unfunded list assumes that, I mean, if you're a district and you have an unfunded approval, you're expecting a certain amount of money. And we don't know necessarily what the next bond is going to look like. And so that's why I talked about having, when we talked in our subcommittee, talked about having a list of accepted applications. And I think we need to date stamp them. But I don't know how you create a true, approved unfunded list if you don't know what the program's going to look like. And that's 2 years away. I also want to get back to how we are going to fund the processing of these applications. Are we going to do this subject to general fund money being available for staff to process them? How are we going to handle that?
Well, I'll have two comments on that. One is we have done it in the past, and we were out of funds for a couple of years,
Right.
and we produced an unfunded list, and that unfunded list, in my estimation, was instrumental in passing a bond measure. So we have a history of having done that, and I can't answer that today, that we know how to do that today, but I would ask that we look at that as staff, and that we've had a history for that.
I know we did, but the history went when we were in very different financial times. I can tell you which
It
times
did,
it
but
was, and we were not, it wasn't.
It could be different
anything new.
financial times, but it still was bond funding. We didn't go to the general fund to fund it. It was bond funding. It was times that we were out. So it has happened.
Right.
And what I'm asked, and I don't have the answer today, but I think that we should investigate that, knowing the history is that it has happened. And then secondly, just on the unfunded list, we also have had a time in our history, not saying it's the perfect way to go forward, but you're asking the question, and this was it, in 1988, when we all negotiated a new program, the program that our partners, the building industry, talked about. We had a list at that time as well. It was an unfunded time, and we had a list for the program that existed. And what we did, I think it created the momentum and the amount of districts interested in passing a bond at the state level because they would receive matching share. I think it completely drove that. I know it did as a school district person at the time. And what we did at that time is we reserved out the amount, or part of the bond measure was that amount, what was on the list, and that it could go to that. But actually, what the legislation that reformed the program provided for, it provided for a choice. And so districts had the choice either to move forward with what they had on the unfunded list in an old program stage. So we had this transition program with this transition time, not a transition program, but a transition time. They had the choice whether to continue in that old program because the bond measure had carved that out, or to move forward in a new program. So there has also been history on how you might handle that. Not saying that's how the legislature, when they put together the next bond measure, wants to handle it, but it is a method that has been done in the past.
I don't know how you give them a choice if you've got a new program and the old program doesn't exist anymore.
We did. It was part of the implementing legislation, and I'll tell you, as a school district employee at the time, it was my job to analyze what was better for the district. And in some cases, the new program was better for the district, and in some cases, the old program was. And it was very district. It was very locally oriented, and districts could make their choices. So that history also exists for this program, and it was part of implementing legislation, and it was the will of the legislature at the time.
Let me ask another question, and I don't want to belabor the point, but the other 3 times we've kept lists, twice was for modernization and once for new construction, but we never had modernization, new construction, overcrowded relief. We never had all the programs run out of money at the same time. Are you suggesting that we reserve money from the program to be able to process? I mean, somehow there's got to be some funding there to be able to process these claims, and then do we take that money for 2 years to process and then maybe not fund a couple of projects instead? I mean, I'm just trying to
Certainly, I would suggest that. I'm also very open to other ideas around how we manage this time. I just know historically we've managed it before, and both, to my knowledge, both programs, both major programs, modernization and new construction, were out of funds at the same time, and that we did manage the program during that during that time period, and we never went to the general fund to fund the program. So the history is there for that, and perhaps it would be best for the board to discuss it, to discuss it in depth and get that information and have all that before us. But the history has been there to operate in that manner.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I just want to make sure I understand the motion correctly.
There has not been one.
Oh, okay. Well, I think if it's the recommendation to go back to the subcommittee to come up with some information, some recommendations back to the board. Implementation committee. I don't necessarily have a problem with that if we're going to review this thing. I think the devil's in the details for me. If you're making an obligation list with some legal binding type of thing, whatever the bonds are, this is the order they're going to go in and this and that, I think it's hard to say because we're a couple of years off away from that bond and what it may look like, what it may be funding, what new construction, old construction, modernization, those type of things. If it's a needs type of test where we date stamp and say this shows the need, is my impression from the subcommittee. What we're going for is what is the need out there to go advocate for in a future bond issuance. I'm definitely in favor of that. I'm just curious of how that language would be if we start taking applications under one program that may look totally different, just like the different bond issuance before. We have, planned labor agreements that came out. We have all this new stuff that the legislature keeps passing that will change one way or the other the way this thing looks. 2 years from now, probably we'll have a lot more. And I just want to make sure that this board has the flexibility, whatever that board is at that time, to use that as informational purposes. We qualify projects under the new system and go out, but not necessarily locking them into a system that may not exist because we run out of funds here.
If I may.
Ms. Moore?
I understand the recommendation is for the implementation committee and the staff to do the devil's in the detail. And what I am simply asking is that we do not preclude any possible option to come back before the board. And then the board has the opportunity for the full discussion, that we haven't predisposed the discussion at the implementation nor at the staff level, but that we leave it open so that we can have the opportunity to have a robust discussion on how we might want that list to be.
Are you suggesting then that we not take action today, but we allow the implementation to come back to us with details, and hopefully included in those details is where we're going to reserve funding to continue to do this for 2 years?
Well, that's what this recommendation says. It says the subcommittee recommends creation of the simplified list, and this is what I'm speaking to, with details to be developed by staff and/or the implementation committee. And I'm saying I support that. I strongly support that. But I-
Our simplified list, in my mind, was not a true, what I would say, unfunded where
And
you're
that's-
approving.
That's where I was asking.
what she's aiming
That's where I was asking for Assemblymember Buchanan, if we could not preclude that discussion, if we could not predispose that discussion and ask for them, for a robust discussion about about what the recommendation would be back to the board.
Then my suggestion would be that we direct the implementation committee to come back to us and we take action at that point in time, because my biggest concern is I don't want to make promises that we can't deliver. I think it's important to keep a list. I think if you're going to have a 2+ year period where there's absolutely no program in place, that there are many different policies that have to be considered. But I believe, one, we've got to have a way to process those applications. And in my mind, if I'm going to vote for it, I want to be sure that I'm not promising a district something where they're going out and making financial decisions and we end up not being able to deliver on it.
Okay.
I think we're talking the same thing. Ask the implementation committee to do their best at a recommendation with staff and come back before the board and have a robust discussion. I think, are we the same?
Not to preclude, but what you're saying is not to preclude what she's saying.
I'm not precluding it. I'm just saying because we want to expand what the intent was, I'd like to delay a vote on it from my perspective till I know exactly what it is we're voting on.
It's right now to recommend that
The implementation
we need
committee,
to vote on that?
Well, we need to get consensus for the board. There's a couple of issues going on here. There always, one of the questions is continuing to accept applications beyond the current available authority.
gotcha.
So I need to understand from staff, does this, to continue, in the absence of this authority or this direction from the board, you will not accept beyond the bond authority? And so you have nothing. And if you then are, if we're telling you to go to the implementation committee, then you do nothing with those things until the implementation comes with the recommendation to the board, and then we have the vote and the conversation and send it back if we don't agree?
That's correct. Well, and there's still projects that come in on a daily basis, and those projects will increase our workload, which is subject to whatever we have in our bank account for bond authority. So we're kind of teetering on that issue right now where we're going to tip our hands and not have that extra authority to cover those projects that come through the door. So, I guess the sooner the better for us to have that dialogue, because we're going to be at that pinch point where we're going to be beyond our authority with projects that walk through the door.
So so the board action would be to allow you to continue to accept the applications beyond the bond authority is going to be the first threshold that you'll need to meet.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then the second issue then is, beyond that, how does it look? Is it a plain list as proposed by the committee, and you take a look at it, or is it more robust and includes perhaps an unfunded list as proposed by Ms. Moore? Am I understanding the issue?
I don't think so, because the
Okay.
list beyond authority is the same list.
Thank you. Well, that was
And-
my bahan.
And I think there's consensus that we want to continue to demonstrate need. When that was part of the recommendation, it was tied to, in my mind, to the recommendation that we were going to stretch out the program. We're not going to stretch out the program. So I want to know, one, where are we going to reserve money to continue processing applications? And two, Ms. Moore has brought up she wants to also take a look at whether we just accept applications or whether we provide some sort of unfunded approval, I guess.
Right.
And I think that's expanding what we intended to do. And so what I'm saying from my perspective, rather than voting on it today, which I'm not sure I can, I would like to see what it's going to look like, where the money's going to come from, and what exactly is we're recommending that we do, because I don't want to have, I'm very concerned about having an approval in a district thinking that it's going to get money, and if the program changes and it's not going to get that, it's making those financial decisions.
What I don't understand, I don't think we're asking, Ms. Moore is asking us to approve anything.
The other way.
It's just to send to discuss when they come back to discuss points that you brought up, where we're going to fund it, and points that she's brought up. That's all we're asking to
And
do.
I think we're in agreement, but I think we were talking about a motion. I don't think we necessarily need a motion to do that, right?
Really?
Because I think we're giving direction to staff and the implementation committee to bring that back to us so we can vote in terms of how we're going to keep this list going into the future.
You have that, but the staff does need direction on what to do
Projects that walk through the door.
for projects that walk through the door. That can't, so you do need a motion.
I don't mind
to
doing it.
give
It's not
them.
clear. I
I
think
just
we're in
want to,
agreement. We just, before we finally vote, ultimately, we know what we need, the information. It's just how do we ask the implementation committee to do that is really.
it's sort of a two pieces to the motion. Staff.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in the meantime, if we exhaust the authority between now and whenever the implementation committee has the discussions and it goes back to the board for full action, we can continue to accept applications but not process them. That's one, we do need that direction from the board.
So you end up on date stamping, which is what the original recommendation was. So we end up defaulting to what the subcommittee recommended in the first place.
At minimum, we can accept the applications and not process them until we get further direction from the board on a true unfunded list.
But you also will discuss and come back to the board, the implementation committee will come back to the board about a true unfunded.
That's correct, Senator. This is just if we exhaust the authority before we have that robust discussion and before we come back to the board.
So do you need a motion that will say we'll accept and date stamp applications pending the recommendation from the implementation committee and further action by the board? So can I make that motion?
Could you say it again, Ms.?
That we will accept and date stamp applications pending the implementation committee's work and final further action by the board.
Is that sufficient direction? So at this point, I just want to understand that we basically end up with this committee's recommendations and nothing more. And then implementation committee will come back, and then at that point, you will propose what you will propose, and then we will take action accordingly.
And not precluding it, all options.
All options, all robust discussions.
Including those options, and you will come to a recommendation.
And then the board will vote up or down on what I'll refer to the enhancements of the list, because we got to give you direction on a list now. What is it? What's the minimum it has?
Correct.
That's
And then you will come in with implementation committee on how that could be enhanced or be more robust, and then we will then take action on that particular list.
That's correct.
That's correct.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. So if somebody wants to make that motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, ayes have it. Thank you. And I think that's the end of the minor subject. All right, options for execution of the 2012 grant amounts.
What number are we at? Where are we?
We are now.
We're in tab 10.
130.
132, this was a held over from last time.
Yes, Michael Watanabe with OPSC. This item is we bring him back from last month at the January board. The board approved the Marshall and Slope 8 California cities to increase their per pupil grant for the school facility program grants. That resulted in an increase of 3.76% increase.
Cut to the chase here. There were four options.
So
Option one is to provide no adjustment. We already dissected this thing last time
The
around.
board wanted a history. We've put that on stamp page 134 of how the boards applied the grant in the past. Given where we are with bond authority and the unique circumstance where we're out of cash and bond authority with no expectation of more bond authority in the future, staff's recommending option one. Board take no action and don't provide adjustments to the school facility grants for any project added to the unfunded list prior to January 2012. As a reminder, at the top of page 135, if the board approves the CCI increase the unfunded projects, we need approximately $44 million in bond authority, of which about $11 million would be for new construction.
Okay, and last time we took this issue up, option one was moved. It did not garner enough votes, and nobody else had a substitute motion. And in the absence of any motion, is default really is option one, right? Do I understand this? Yes, okay.
Absent any action, correct, yes.
Yes.
As I read the statute, it says that the board shall annually adjust the per unhoused pupil apportionment. And so option 1 doesn't actually deal with that issue. And if we are to adjust the apportionment, that means at the time that cash apportionment is provided to the school district, that it is adjusted. And if that's the case, I think we need an option 5 that says we will adjust the apportionment to 2012 if there is one in 2012. If there's the indice is at 2012 now. If we apportion a project in 2012, it should be applied to that project. Am I reading this correctly?
That's correct. The risk where we are right now is we're pretty much out of bond authority. So if the apportionments are provided after that, we won't have authority to give them.
It's not authority. An apportionment is not authority. An apportionment already had authority.
Right, but to give them the increase, you're going to need more bond authority.
We don't have the cash to meet that adjustment. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Say it again. I'm not following.
Right now, where we're projecting, say, with the new construction authority, is we're going to run out in April of 2012. If the board does not provide apportionments for those projects prior to April 2012, we won't have authority to give them an increase for the CCI.
When you say authority, you say cash.
Authority.
Bond money.
Authority.
Authority.
We need bond authority to give them the increase.
Okay.
So we should both provide it for the authority, but we have to, by law, provide it for the apportionment. So we need both.
You will need a cash eventually, yes, when you plug them in also. But the authority is the first step you need.
I think, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and it seems fairly complex. However, the board, and I wasn't here last board meeting, so I apologize on that part, but I think I'm up to speed. The board voted for everything after 2012, that it will, on the authority action, apply a 2012 indice.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is, in addition to that, I think that the code reads, is it code or regulation?
Statute, I believe.
Statute reads that it has to be applied on the apportionment. So we apply it 2012, which actually doesn't do anything unless somebody comes in for cash. That's their budget. But when they come in for cash, as I read this, we have to give them the indice that exists.
I think one way, option 4, adjust the unfunded list that we have now to increase for the CCI in 2012. So you can take the authority that's needed to update the complete unfunded list, and if they come in and get an apportionment in 2012, the authority would have already been available for those projects.
How about this? Why not, if they come in for an apportionment, because it could be a 2010, it could be a 2009, it could have been an 11. When they come in 2012, if they come in from 2012 for an apportionment, at the same time you adjust their authority.
Yeah.
That's an option.
That's an option.
That's an option, and one of the issues with that is that some of that money has already been spent. The construction has already occurred.
Right. I think that option 4 would already give you an updated unfunded list to give them the 2012 amounts.
This is the problem, and I could, when I made the recommendation before, it was under the, I have since learned that sometimes we've applied it retroactively and sometimes we haven't. But this is the issue. You're going to give authority that goes up to your bonding capacity. And if you wait to adjust the rates until you're ready to fund a project, you don't have a true list of what you've approved. Because I could have approved a project that's $10 million, but if the rate goes up, it's really, I'm just using an $11 million project. So we have to have a consistent policy that either says, yes, we go back, or no, we don't go back. We've done it both ways. And when I argued last week, it was because with construction bids and stuff, we're still below most of the estimates. But you have to make a decision now, because if not, they're going to give approvals, right? And approve projects, and then if I raise the other ones above them, these districts are going to think they're in line for money, and they're not, because we will have run out.
I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that the authority has to increase now, even though we might not use it.
To match the bonding.
To match it. And I guess I'm willing to support that, because I actually think we're out of compliance with law if we are not providing those projects in their apportionments with the 2012 indice, which it indicates here. And I'll tell you, you know, in the old world, what I know we're not in for the last 2 years, but that indice happened at the time that you went out to bid, and it made sense, because that's when you needed the cash, that's when the bid climate was like what it was,
And that's what
all of that. And so by still doing it at the apportionment stage, it matches that. And we did all, you know, full disclosure, we did also, when the year that it dipped, we didn't give them the dip, you know, and I realized that that's wanting your cake and eat it too. But then I read that it's the apportionment.
Well, my suggestion is, I mean, this isn't a sword I'm going to fall on one way or the other, is that I actually agree with you, by the way, that they should be getting it at the time they bid, and some of them come in retroactively and get it at the higher amount. But I think that right now, given our system, would probably be an accounting nightmare for staff. But if whatever we decide to do, I would suggest that we make sure we clarify that, so we don't end up where we are now, where we've done one thing one time and another, and we have that clarity, and then it's done consistently in the future. So if it should be that they all get whatever the grant amount is at the time that they request funds or we give the authority, then let's do that, and then we have to clarify it so that we don't continue to be where we've been in the past, where we haven't been quite so consistent.
So in order to do that, what options is that?
For
And that's the most expensive option, right?
Right, well, it just means that fewer projects will get a portion. We only have so much money, so, you know.
So, is there a motion? Is there any comments from the public? Thank you. We discussed this last time.
I'll move option 4.
It's been moved. Second? Okay. Any other options?
Okay, can I try one other thing? And maybe you've
Hold on,
already...
Mr. Hackman
I'm
was,
sorry.
I'm just back to the chair. You said that default's option 1 if nothing else passes, correct?
you can comment. Do you want to move option 1?
I don't think we need to if it's default's there, but I'll move option 1.
Moved option 1. Ms. Moore, you had a comment?
I just want to ask
You, Mike?
clarity one last time. I guess I'm not speaking to the option 1 piece, so I have a question on a different...
Okay, so it's been moved. Is there a second? Then we can have the conversation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Almanza seconds. Okay, Ms. Moore.
My question is still on my option 5, where we only apply it to the apportionments that are done in 2012 as the law states. Is that possible to do?
It depends if we have authority. Option 4, what it does is it reserves the authority at the 2012 levels. And if those projects, the project is in the unfunded list right now, they have what they were approved by the board. So if you adjust them to give them the 2012 levels, when they get an apportionment, if they get cash, then they're going to get the apportionment based on the 2012 amounts, because you've already increased the amount. So you have to reserve enough authority. It would be option 4 to adjust everybody for 2012 amounts, and if any of those projects that are on the unfunded list get an apportionment in 2012, they would have enough authority.
Right. And so what we did not agree to do, because it was a failed motion, that we would increase them all as kind of planning in case somebody comes in. And what I was saying is, when somebody comes in, it's real, we adjust their authority then, and Assemblymember Buchanan rightfully points out, well, that might not turn out really well in the end. And I understand that, but I also know that we are out of compliance with law. So the law states that it's adjusted at apportionment. So how do we get around that issue?
The board has done this in the past. Prior years, they have.
Well, but does that make it legal? Henry?
As long as at the time of apportionment, you give the amount that you are authorizing as a CCI, you're fine. What this action does is it creates a reservation of those amounts for all projects instead of the ones that just really come in.
I hear you.
And the only problem with that gets to the goal that you're talking about, Ms. Moore, but the problem with that is it uses up the bond authority, so you don't have that flexibility to use that money for other projects that may come in later.
I hear that, and I hear the problem with potentially overinflating, and I see the will of the board on not wanting to put that kind of authority in, but I also believe that we're out of legal compliance.
Technically, you're not out of legal compliance unless you make an apportionment and you don't do the adjustment. As long as at that time you catch up and you do give the apportionment at that time.
So we do have to do the 2012 adjustment on any cash apportioned in 2012.
That's correct, but even back in 2010, when there was a decrease, we didn't honor that same commitment to the Ed Code by decreasing the projects as well. So I think we've gone back and forth on that fence.
Gotcha.
This board has handled it both ways, correctly and potentially incorrectly, depending on how you interpret it.
Senator Hancock.
So I was just going to suggest that we would move option 1 with the amendment that if a project was final, we would in fact only reimburse for the actual costs. Now, does that solve the problem or not? No.
No.
Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Seems logical.
Option 1's been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the roll. Yes. I invited public testimony earlier. Nobody came up. In fact, it was a joke because I said thank you. But go ahead. You want to come in? I certainly don't want to censor anybody.
I just thought I heard Ms. Moore offered. There was no second.
There was no second to it. So, okay, but option 1 was moved and seconded.
That's correct.
So that's those before us, in case anybody's tracking back there. All right, call the roll.
Lowenthal. Hancock. Laura. Buchanan. Hagman. Almanza. Moore.
No.
Reyes.
Aye.
Motion does not pass.
Okay. We were here last month.
Well, my prior motion for option 4 died for lack of a second, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'll move the option 5, and that is that projects that are apportioned in 2012 will receive the 2012 indice and the authority at the same time.
Is that something that can be done?
You have to keep a reservation of funds, of authority on the side, just in case we
Of how
cover those
much?
projects. It all depends, because we have the CERT period, we had 760 projects, or $760 million in projects that came in waiting for a bond sale to execute, to move those apportionments over. So you could technically reserve for that pot of funds, but then that's all conditional, because there could be also a spring and fall bond sale. So it's probably best to keep a reservation of the entire list as a backup, and then credit the account once those projects haven't come in.
Could you walk me through, I mean, we have unfunded approvals, we have apportionments, we have funding. So what you're talking about is they would get an unfunded approval at a certain amount. No, the apportionment would be at the 2012 rate if it's approved in
cashed in 2012. I'm using cash and apportionment synonymously because that's where it is now.
Okay, what you're funding at, so, okay, right.
So you need to, okay, it's been moved in second. So you need to set aside some unknown amount.
Right, in order to cover potentially projects that come in through the door. And since the universe is unknown about how much cash we're going to get, we would have to potentially reserve for the entire list, just to be safe,
Which is option 4.
which is option 4.
So,
But credit back
So
the...
you would have, so what option 5 is, you would set aside essentially $44 million, and then the actual expense would depend on what actually comes in.
That's correct.
I have another idea, that, because I think that might, I see that did not have the support of the board. So we know now the universe of those projects that will, once we receive cash, say they can in 90 days perfect the project. You reported on that today.
That's correct.
What if we held the authority and provided the apportionment with a 2012 indice for that universe?
But you still have another certification round that actually opens up in July and August. So you would still, could be additional pressure by not having a reservation.
I'm not saying to, we would have to take that action on those projects later. I'm saying the universe that we know right now and what its amount is,
Right.
that we would apportion and authority for those projects.
Reserve it.
Yes.
so are we not back to option 4?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
That is option 4.
That is option 4.
It's not, because option 4 is the entire unfunded list.
But you can't, if you don't do the entire list is going to be 2012 or later, right? So the entire list is, you can't, if something's on the list now, it's not going to get a 2011 approval, that's passed. So it's either going to get a 2012 approval or later. So you've got to increase the amount for all the projects on the list to 2012. The real question that's going to come up is, one, if you don't do it now, you may not be able, if you're going to do that, you better do it now, because you don't want to have other projects that submit applications and we can't approve them because we've taken that authority, because we are basically reserving authority for those projects. The other issue that'll come up, if for some reason, we still have money in 2013, then you're going to potentially have a situation where you can't increase them all because you will have had you will have apportioned more money than you have in bonding authority.
I guess I am not seeing that my motion is saying to approve authority item as option 4. I am saying approve authority and apportionment for the universe that we know is coming in for cash with this last round of, what do we call it, priority? Certification. That's all my motion covers.
And so anyone that comes in later would get the 2011 apportionment?
I'd say we have to determine that later.
Well, I think you've got to be consistent with people.
The problem is you're legally obligated to give that same adjustment to those other ones that come in 2012. What option 1 does is it allows the board to potentially calculate for the, okay, let me take a step back. The reason the board hasn't done option 4 in the past is because historically the staff and the board knows that there is some number, however large or small, of those approved projects that for whatever reason will drop out and not come in. So to prevent that project that ultimately is going to drop out from reserving money that could be used for a project that is going to come through, that's why option 4 was not used by the board in the past. If you're going to give the, adjustment, or you're prepared to give the adjustment for the projects that have come in, you have to reserve the funds so that you have the funds available for every project on the list, even though you know some of the ones may not come in because you don't know which ones those are going to be. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's...
Right now, I do know the ones that it's going to be because we have a certified list. I don't see where...
That's what
I don't see where taking this action and this vote now sets the course for projects that aren't on that certified list.
We're not talking about projects that aren't on the list. We're talking about projects that are on the list but for whatever reason may not come through. You're reserving the funds, the adjustment, and all we're talking about is the CCI adjustment for those projects. You're giving them those adjustments even though those projects may not come in.
All right.
Okay, so you had a motion, it had been seconded. You want to withdraw the motion, or you want to proceed?
I would like to proceed.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Lowenthal. Hancock. Lara. Buchanan. Hagman. Almanza. Moore. Reyes. Motion does not carry.
All right, so moving on then. Item 13. Priority funding process.
I know, in the spirit of trying to keep it short. So we actually have a policy question in play as far as the board actually established the priority of funding process in regulations, and obviously the process has evolved over the last year and a half. And with that regulation change, the process has been established in 2 periods, meaning the 30 days open and effective near the bond sale. So with that respect, the regulations were adopted by the board back in May, and the regulations were put in effect in July. That opened up the certification period for the period in question. So those certifications are actually valid until January 10th. So if I can draw your attention to page 155A, there's a timeline that we have produced that kind of outlines the question. We did have projects that came in with rescissions, and the cash did become available. Well, the board actually did take a pro forma action and declaring those projects credited back to the bond authority back in December, although the cash being technically was available at the end of October. Since the certifications are valid between August through January 10th, our understanding of how the regulation is very prescriptive that the certifications must be valid before we can give apportionments. And again, the whole purpose of the certification, and the board adopted this whole process, is again provide clarity and how we fund projects. So the real question is, outside of that December action, making those projects now deemed available, can the board actually fund projects with invalid certifications, bringing that forward to the January board? Because the certifications are no longer valid. So that's really the policy question for the board.
Okay, this is an informational item. I know that we have some folks that want to testify on this, but it's informational. Ms. Moore, you have your mic up. Please. Before you do that, we have some, Mr. Lar, do you want to be recorded as aye in the consent? And you were here for the, you were here for the consent for the minutes. He was here. Senator Lowenthal.
I want to be here, aye.
Aye. And then, would you please, what's missing on the, I just want to make sure I have everybody.
Bruce, give her the other mic, the long mouse.
You actually had approval votes on all those, and then we started doing new construction with the roll call.
Okay. So we're good on all the votes.
Everybody's caught up.
Oh, yeah, everybody's caught up. And then Mr. Lar wants to be recorded as a,
No.
on the recommendation of, which one hold on a sec, on the item that failed. But just to be clear,
Okay, be clear, please, let I know.
I don't believe.
the metering out item. Okay, thank you. That piece, yeah. Thank you. All right. Yes. He abstained and then realized that he really wanted to go as a no vote on it. So, okay. Thank you. I apologize. Please proceed.
Thank you. Charlotte Gaston, Oceanside Unified School District. The district is requesting that the State Allocation Board allocate the funds that are available from the rescissions based on the priority list that was in place when those funds became available. We believe that the regulations allow it and that it meets the goal of putting out as much cash as possible, and will certainly allow some projects to go forward as soon as possible. We are really not sure when the next bond sale will be to fund those that have the unfunded approvals, and the priority funding that occurred in January was projects that were approved in January of 11, so that's basically a whole year. We're beginning to see the construction prices increasing for us, so it's important for us to get going as soon as we possibly can. When we looked at the item in the SAB agenda, it appeared to be an argument against funding these as soon as possible, as opposed to making them available as soon as possible.
Thank you. Bruce?
Thank you, Chairman Reyes, members of the board. I'm Bruce Hancock, Park and DeLong. We've been working with Oceanside on this and other issues, and when it came up, I thought it raised a very important policy question that, frankly, I had misunderstood, I guess. I did participate, or at least attend all of the subcommittee discussions on the priority funding round, and I thought that I understood that essentially a basic rule of the priority funding was that when money became available, it would be given to projects on the list at that time. And I certainly wouldn't maintain that we discussed that in, the various, the subcommittee or at this board. It was just simply my understanding of what the policy was. When Oceanside raised this issue, it brought to light the idea, the circumstance that in fact maybe we're not all agreeing on what the policy is, and so for that reason we'd like to ask the board to weigh in on it, because it seems that the policy under the definition that OPSC has provided to the board in this very good write-up today really is that funding is provided to districts who are on the list when the apportionments are made, as opposed to those on the list when the funding becomes available. I think that there's an very important distinction there, and it just so happens that because we have crossed the border from one priority list to another, we see the outcome, or we see why the distinction is important. That funding became available while Oceanside Unified and other school districts, I'm sure, were valid priority list projects who had submitted valid certifications. But because of necessary administrative actions, and we definitely do not argue that there may be times when apportionments cannot be made virtually overnight. OPSC has produced miracle after miracle in bringing huge amounts of apportionments forward. They're not always going to be able to do that, and not every situation will be allow that accomplishment. But we think that if you use the apportionment as the determination of which projects should get the funding, you introduce an ambiguity into the program. The date that funding becomes available is a date certain. And if it isn't a date certain, then maybe the board needs to talk about that. But when you introduce that it's when the apportionment happens, you introduce, as I said, an ambiguity. When will that be? The next month? 3 months further? And in this particular case, it's caused us to cross a threshold so that the funding will go, or could possibly go, to districts that were not on the list when the funding became available. That seems to Oceanside and to me as not in conformance with the way I understood the board's priority point process, and we really very much appreciate your time and consideration, and we do second the idea that we need to have clarity. Thank you.
Ms. Moore. Yeah.
Just how many priority and funding rounds have we had?
We've actually had, the first one, we created a informal certification period, and that was in 2010. Then we actually had, early 2010, for 400 million. In December 2010, we actually had another certification round because we had a bond sale. And then we constituted this new one because we had established regulations. So we've had 3.
And districts that haven't received funding or apportionment, have they reapplied in the next round?
That's correct.
And that's been the standard practice?
That's correct. If they didn't receive the cash, they could recertify.
When you talk about ambiguity,
yes,
and wanting clarity, I think for a district to not receive an apportionment, but not to reapply in a subsequent round, I mean, to keep that list creates more uncertainty, because you don't know if all the projects are going to perfect or if some of them aren't. So having, treating it the way we've been, where if you don't receive it, you reapply in the next round, it seems to me that is a better way to do it.
Thank you for the opportunity to address that. First of all, Oceanside did apply for the next round, but there's an important consideration here. Each round of the priority funding is a fresh start. Projects that did not request it previously can request it this time, and in that case, some of those projects may move to the top of the list, and so it is, even though a district may reapply, when they were, let's say, number 1 on the unfunded list, if you'll call it that, the priority list that didn't get money, when the next list is constituted, even when that district refiles, which in this case they did, they may no longer be within the funding range because other districts have moved to the top of the list. I don't want it to sound like this is a war between districts. It is an issue about clarity of what is the determining factor of what list gets the funding.
Yeah.
Could I add something to that? The amount of funds available from the rescissions, when I looked at the list last time, was about $40-something million. And there's approximately $700 million worth of certified projects for the next funding round. Part of the request is we have $60 million. Can we allocate that to eligible projects instead of waiting for another bond sale?
Ms. Moore? Oh, good.
The question you're asking is which projects do you allocate it to? That's where you want clarity.
That's the other part. Validated cert list, which is now the one in play right now.
Ms. Moore, and then Mr. Hagman?
To put it in, if I may, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in simplified terms, we heard at the beginning of the meeting that there was $60 million that wasn't apportioned during the previous bond from the previous bond sale.
No, we had $11 million from the prior bond sale, $11.5 million, which we reported out in December apportionment that we couldn't get to all the projects. Plus, we have the 47+ million, so that makes up the $60 million.
The 47 that was rescinded during that project.
Right, plus 11.5.
So in simple terms, then, the $60 million became available during the certification period that we were previously in. And what the policy question is in my mind, is does the cash go to those that are on that certification list during the time when the cash arrives, or are there circumstances that we hold that cash to a future certification list? And you're indicating that it's been the circumstance that that happens previously, but it's a big policy issue. And I guess the reason that I'm empathetic to the policy issue, and maybe we can't do anything about it because it's an information item, but if the board is inclined, we could have the policy discussion with an action item, is this. Those are known. You know, it's known when who's certified and how they certified, and it's also known when the cash came in. And it seems that it's not subject to and I'm not saying intentional nor unintentional manipulation, but when you have it such that the cash comes in, and for whatever reason, it could be great reasons, for whatever reason, it isn't apportioned during that time period, it moves to the next slot. It seems that it could be subject to manipulation and or intended or not, and those are a whole different circumstance of projects, as is indicated, and so I think it merits more discussion, policy-wise. I don't know, do any of my other board members support that?
This is a good example why taking these date stamps of projects, when we run out of funds and wait 2 or 3 years for bonds, how that's going to create lots of issues coming up if you prioritize them. It's one thing to get an indication what you need for bond authority in the future. It's another thing to start date stamping who got them first and what do you do with that policy. Because as time goes, 6 months is one thing, but if you go a year, 2 years more in between these rounds, to say that needs assessment, that priority list that was done 2 years ago is the same for the districts, much less the state, a certain period of time later, is that timeline. If you just leave a blank policy one way or the other, and you don't have a definition of how long that's good for, and it does take another year or possibly 3 years now before we have another bond sale, then that list may not be valid anymore. And I think that's why you go for these different rounds. And just like you're applying for grants or anything else, there's going to be winners and losers all the time. And if the certification period is the timeline that you've been using in the past, it's only open for that period of time. That means these projects are certified, ready to go, and they meet the qualifications. Then the policy discussion may be that is there priority to those projects then make it to recertify and be put at the top of the list, but you don't have that timeline. So I think instead of saying just automatically go back to the first funding or automatically do this, that you may want to have a discussion, okay, what is that timeline? What is the procedure for those who didn't make that list, make it onto the next list with priority because they're waiting longer? I think that's the fairness question you're trying to address. But for me, there's a difference in the timeline, and that's why you have that certification period right now.
Ms. Buchanan.
I would say, I think the question, one is it would change the practice of what we're doing, but I think the question is, when money comes back into a program, does that come back to the new construction program or modernization program, or does it go back to a specific round of apportionment? Was the intent to apportion a certain amount of money in a round, or is the intent to keep that money, even if it comes back or whatever, only with that round? It seems to me, and I could be wrong, and we probably don't want to be here forever tonight, that's the essential question. When money comes back, does it stay with the new construction program, for example, so that would go into the next round of apportionment, or is money there to stay strictly with the round? It seems to me the practice has been when money comes back, it comes back to the program and it gets apportioned out according to how you're going to do it, whether you have another priority, however you decide you're going to do that in the future. And that seems to me to have been what the past practice has been with the programs. What we're going to do, if we change to what you're suggesting, we're going to say basically that money stays with that round of apportionment, and if someone doesn't perfect, then you stick with that round. And I think, to me, that's the essential policy question. I think the cleaner thing is to, if money comes back for whatever reason, I think it stays with the program, but you're going to allocate that in the future. That would be. But I'm open to having a much deeper discussion on
we should put that as a policy question, but let's say that you are number one or number two, just your example, and then you reapply for the new funding round, and let's say you're at the top versus the bottom and got funded. Now you still have this list, that list, you have partial funding coming in here. How do you start to prioritize them and blend those together? And I think that, again, back to the policy question, would be the people left on that list, that they go to the top of the list the next round, but then if it's a great period of time, are they still qualified? Do they still have the same need when that time goes through? So bring it up another day. Mr.
Yeah, I
Chair,
think
we'll
it
look
also,
at
I think it also raises the issue, what happens if, when you audit money? You know, does that audited money belong to that apportionment back then, or does it belong to the fund?
Yeah.
But anyway, so,
Absent of any action, just to FYI, we said that we would move $60 million forward, but I guess that's still in play, and just realize we can suspend that action until we have the bigger dialogue. I just want to let you know that's somewhat of a commitment early.
well, we don't have, this is not an action item. This
Right.
is informational, so status quo until the board comes up with something different. Ms. Moore?
Can we ask for the policy discussion to happen then, I guess, or, because we're not having it right now?
Right. So can we send it to implementation committee to come back with the options so they can do all the discussion among the peers and come back with something? Is that okay? Is that, okay, I'm saying I'm, okay. Bill, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I think we'll have 2 meetings next month.
We do have one other informational item, joint use fund release status
Yes, and
report.
the status of that is that project did come in for their cash.
Okay,
So we're
thank
one
you.
and done. Thank you. And then we have the workload list that's attached on tab 14.
Mm-hmm. And
the
then,
approval log. And we're done.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.